is to review an appeal for the conditional use permit denied by the Washington County Planning Board and Zoning Board and the adjustment of November 6, 2014. And then tonight, the prayer and the pledge is going to be handled by J.P. Harvey Bowman. Harvey?
Lord, I just ask you as we come to you tonight, that you'll give us wisdom in making decisions before us. Help us to choose honestly and fairly for the people of this county. We just thank you for who you are and the way you bless us. We ask this all in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Harvey. Carly, would you call the roll, please?
Daniel Balls. Here. Harvey Bowman.
Here.
Rick Cochran.
Here.
Robert Dennis.
Here.
Lisa Ecke.
Here.
John Furman.
Here.
Ann Harbison.
Here.
Tom Lundstrom. Eva Madison.
Here.
Sue Madison.
Here.
Joe Maxwell.
Here.
Joe Patterson.
Here.
Butch Pond.
Here.
Bill Ussery.
Here.
Quorum present. Let me ask a question. Has someone heard from Tom? Would you make us a report, Eva?
Well, Joe may have more recent information, but he was in the hospital for a couple of days. I thought he was going to get out this morning, so I haven't talked to him today, but he was having trouble breathing, so.
Just Joe. Put your mic on, Joe.
This afternoon, it didn't look like he was going to.
So he's still in the hospital?
They want to run another test or two on him today.
Let's do just a moment of silent prayer, please. Thank you very much. Next thing I have is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Before you do that,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a change to the agenda, but I want to bring to your attention it was something not in your packet. The ordinance that was included in your packet, 6.1, is one confirming the decision of the Planning Board and denying the CUP. I drafted one the other way that was included at 6.2. It doesn't need a change to the agenda. I just wanted to call that to your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the motion as is? Say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The agenda is adopted. This is a condition use of the permit appeal, and I'm going to turn this over to our attorney. Mr. Zega, will you take this from here?
I will, and I'll ask first Juliet to come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, so y'all know what's about to happen. Juliet will present remarks on behalf of staff and explain to you why they did what they did. She's also going to give a brief orientation to the court on, especially for our new members, on how we handle zoning appeals and why they come to you, and a brief history of what is zoned and what is not in Washington County. After Juliet does that, the road department and county engineer will present their information. The applicant of the project will present his information. Public in opposition will be asked if they would ask to present any information, ask any questions. When you come, ladies and gentlemen, up to the microphone where Juliet is now speaking, we'll ask you to identify yourself by first and last name and address. Each individual, we're going to ask you to hold your comments to 3 minutes. And if you have a group representative, to hold that presentation to 10 minutes. If you have a group representative, we're going to ask you not to comment individually. After all members of the public have spoken, public comment will be closed. This ordinance is on first reading tonight, will be on first reading tonight. One of them will be on first reading tonight. The court can move to suspend the rules and place it on second and third reading by title only if they choose to do that, which means they may tonight consider the final disposition of this appeal. If they do that, we will reopen public comment 10 minutes for, 10 minutes against the granting of the permit, and each of you will again have 3 minutes to present your individual comments. General rules for commentary tonight. Judge Edwards is the chair. Please direct comments to her unless an individual JP asks you questions, and they may. If that individual Justice of the Peace asks you questions, please engage that Justice of the Peace in dialogue. Second, and probably the actual most important rule, please be polite and civil to one another and to this proceeding. Maintain decorum. Do not oppose an opposing viewpoint or boo an opposing viewpoint or somebody on the other side of you, or loudly cheer or chant for your own. Polite clap, what I refer to as the golf clap, that's good as long as it doesn't disrupt the decorum of the proceeding. And finally, if somebody has already made the point you want to make, please yield the microphone to somebody else. And by that, I mean, if you find yourself repeating something that's been said a lot already, it's probably a good idea not to necessarily say it again. The members of the Quorum Court, our Justices of the Peace, take everything you say very seriously and will consider each and every comment with all the attention that is due to it. With that, Juliet, I'll let you begin if you don't mind.
Okay. First off, I'm just going to go over real quickly some general notes and discussion on zoning, since I know some of this is your first conditional use permit hearing. Zoning in Washington County was originally passed in 2006, and then in limited portions of the county, and then extended basically to the full county in 2007. When it was passed, some of the primary concerns of residents and the reasons for passage revolved around compatibility of uses with existing rural and agricultural uses. And those primary compatibility concerns at that time were with high-density residential developments and high-impact industrial uses, similar to the one we're going to see tonight. We passed an ordinance that allows for lower-density single-family residential, 1 unit per acre, and agricultural uses by right. All other uses, commercial, multifamily, high-density residential, industrial, etc., are by conditional use permit only. The allowance of conditional use permits is based on a set criteria. I just passed out a copy of that criteria, so you'll have it at your fingertips tonight, and we'll also go over it several times during the presentation. It's basically, you have a set of 7 criteria. They have to file a written application and pay appropriate fees. They have to provide proof that property owners are notified as set out by ordinance, that adequate utilities, roads, drainage, and other public services are either available and adequate for the use that they're asking for, or will be made adequate and available if the use is granted, that the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding area, that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to nor endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, and general welfare, that the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the surrounding area for uses that are already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the surrounding area, and that the establishment of the conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding area for uses permitted in the zone. And then finally, if it is determined that there exist conditions that could be imposed by the board that would significantly lessen the aforestated, then the board has the power and the Quorum Court to impose those conditions, which shall be specifically set forth. So what that means is the planning board is going to hear a conditional use permit first. They'll rule on the conditional use permit, and they have the same 3 choices that you have. Those choices are: they can approve as the applicant has submitted it with no conditions, they can deny it, or they can approve it with conditions that they or you allow the proposed use to meet the required criteria that we just talked about. An example that I like to give people that's different than what we're seeing tonight is that, as far as conditions go, is that, you could have a use like someone could have an automotive repair shop, and they could just ask for the ability to have an automotive repair shop. And without conditions, you could have any number of outcomes from that. You could have a very tidy place, Or you could have something that had neon lighting that might upset the neighbors, loud sign. You could have outdoor storage of tires, car parts, and other materials that might, impede on the area, and any number of things. If you when it goes to the conditional use permit process, when a lot of times we'll put conditions on something like the automotive repair shop, it would be fine if the outdoor storage was all screened from site with opaque screening, like wooden fencing. No cars were to be left outside that were business related after business hours. And a condition regulating the type of signage, say that it couldn't be lit at night and could only be a certain height. So you can see how you could have the same use of the automotive repair shop, and you could have conditions that could be applied to it that would make it more palatable to an area that had a lot of residential or agricultural development. I do want to be clear that allowing or considering a use via the conditional use permit process other than what is allowed by right is not a variance to our zoning code. That's a common misconception, that if we're even considering something that is not agricultural or single family, then we're disregarding our code. That's not the case. A variance would be a strict variation on the letter of law. Our zoning ordinance is set up to consider these different types of uses through this process and evaluate them by that criteria list. Staff will give you a detailed report addressing each criteria point directly whenever we hear these. Some points tend to be cut and dry. Did you notify people or not? Safety and infrastructure are usually easier to evaluate, and some can be less so, like compatibility. Staff will tell you our professional analysis of the project and the proposed conditions that we feel may apply in order to meet criteria, but there may be some things that you see differently in regard to aesthetics and compatibility, and that's okay. Compatibility does not mean the same. Things do not have to be the same. It means that they're able to coexist in harmony with one another. Different people may have different ideas regarding what is compatible. For the most part, zoning has been very successful in Washington County. We try our hardest as staff to find conditions that make things work for everybody concerned. We want to grow business and development in Washington County, and then also respect the people that live there and their right to enjoy their property for residential and agricultural uses. And many times we are able to find conditions that will work for both parties. Sometimes we cannot, and unfortunately that's the position that we feel that we are in tonight. Tonight's conditional use permit was denied by the planning board. Staff recommended denial to the planning board and will recommend the same to you for several reasons. One of those reasons is safety. I do want to say that myself and I work with several other departments very closely, the county fire marshal and the road department and environmental affairs department. And I will say that safety is something that we take very seriously. We consider it one of the primary functions of our job. And while we try to have flexibility in a lot of areas, safety is not an area that we have a lot of flexibility in, I feel like, because I feel like that we owe it to the people of Washington County to make sure that they have safe developments. Our job is also to help protect the general taxpayer's dollar so that they're not picking up the tab, I guess, for certain types of developments and issues that they may cause down the road. That's all I have. I think Steve has a couple additional remarks to make regarding zoning.
Thank you, Juliet. And before I begin, two things. You just heard a cell phone go off. If you have one, please silence it. Folks who are standing in the back, we do have a couple of chairs up here we'd love for you to take. They're close to the front. Don't be shy. Before we begin the detailed staff presentation, I wanted to talk to the Quorum Court and give some legal advice that's especially fresh in my mind, given the fact that I did oral argument at the 8th Circuit yesterday in Kansas City on a zoning issue that was that several members of this court had an opportunity to hear back in the summer of 2013, I believe, on a cell tower. Cell towers get special consideration. We won't worry about that tonight, but some of the things that apply to a cell tower also apply here. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is, if you do decide tonight as a body to move this ordinance up, to move this decision up to its final decision, whatever your decision you take, voting for the CUP or voting against it, and as we get there, I'll explain the ordinance which does what. Please go down the list of 11-200 that's in front of you that Juliet passed out, and state which criteria you are basing your vote on. And I'll just be real blunt and unpleasant. The reason we do that is that many of these issues tend to wind up in litigation, tend to wind up in court, and a reviewing court wants to know, reviews your decision basically for whether or not y'all followed your own zoning ordinance. In other words, did you pick criteria out of this ordinance and then follow evidence that you got presented tonight or whenever you make your ultimate decision, whether it's now or 3 meetings from now, and plug that into the ordinance and base your decision on those criteria. So, again, if we do wind up voting tonight, I'll ask you to keep that in mind, and I'll say it again as we get closer to that. Generally, the 3 issues that you might consider tonight under 11-200 are compatibility, criteria 4, safety, criteria 5, and injury to the surrounding land and the use and enjoyment of that land by other property owners, and the diminution potentially in property value, and that's criteria 6. I'm going to give y'all this bit of advice too, hopefully to put your minds at ease. JP asked me the question the other day, should I be getting personal liability insurance for my time here on the Quorum Court? My answer to that question is this: if that helps you sleep better at night, that's great. However, you generally enjoy broad immunity for your legislative actions on this court. In other words, the votes you cast, the policies you make, what you do for this county, you generally enjoy broad liability.
Judge Mass.
Yes,
Question.
go right ahead.
Mr. Zega, actually, it's funny you brought that up because we discussed that issue at end of court on Tuesday night, and the dean of the law school said that the general counsel of the university has advised that if we have personal liability insurance, that our liability insurance will then be on the hook and immunity doesn't apply. So it made me a little worried about having personal liability insurance, and I asked her, should I get rid of it? She said she didn't want to pass on that, but it's something for us to consider, because the whole presentation that night was on immunity, because we have qualified immunity. Apparently, if we have any kind of personal liability insurance, it will apply, and qualified immunity only applies after that. That was the advice given to me on Tuesday night. So
Okay.
it's very coincidental, the timing, but it made me a little nervous if I need to call my insurance agent.
And the immunity about which I'm talking is not immunity from suit. Okay, as I tell people quite frequently, anybody with directions to the courthouse, a typewriter, and $165 can sue you. The question is whether you are immune and from liability and judgment. In other words, will the suit be successful? Okay, so despite the dialogue just now between Eva and myself, you should generally feel pretty good about your personal issues, members of the court, for what you do up here. All right. Finally, this is just a side note. If there is testimony, or not testimony, we're not swearing anybody in, but if there is commentary tonight from landowners, property owners about the value of their property, you need to know that in Arkansas, generally speaking, a landowner is a property owner's competent. In other words, legally allowed to speak to the value of his or her property. That does not necessarily equal the same or carry the same weight as, say, an expert appraiser who would come in and say, I made 4 different comparisons, and I did this and I did that, and in my opinion, this property is worth X, and if the CUP is granted, it'll be worth Y, or X minus Y, okay? But you're certainly allowed to consider what folks say is the value of their property if they are the owners, all right? And, Juliet, that's all I have if you're ready to proceed with the staff report. And pending any questions from the court for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will tell you, I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. As you saw from all the documentation you got, there's a lot to cover.
Just a moment. Can you? I know that you're a little bit hoarse. Can you speak a little louder? I think the notice that some of the people back here are having a hard time hearing. Okay. Thank you, Julia.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got to pull this thing across the table. Okay. This is the conditional use permit request for the Rich Red Dirt Pit conditional use permit. It was denied by the Planning Board on November 6th, 2014. This project site is located west of Fayetteville. The entrance is proposed onto Harmon Road. It's located north of Weddington or Highway 16 West. This is a conditional use permit approval request for Rich Red Dirt CUP to transition agricultural and residential property into an open pit, red dirt, clay, gravel, and extraction operation. The project does lie within a county-zoned area. It is zoned, as we spoke earlier, agricultural and single-family residential, 1 unit per acre, and the project is not located within the city's planning area. It is within Quorum Court District 7, which is Rick Cochran's district. The property is owned by Mark Rich. The operation proposes the construction of a haul road and red dirt pit operations, which is extraction of clay and gravel. I do want to note that this application does not include rock quarrying. It is only for dirt and gravel mining. The proposed road from Harmon Road will connect to a proposed open-cut mining area. You'll see it's hatched on this plan. That area is approximately 9.3 acres in size. It should be noted this is a large piece of property, approximately 123 acres, which has legal access points from both Harmon Road, right here where they're proposing to take access, and Rich's Road, right here. Both of these are county roads. Mr. Rich and the applicant at this time have elected to propose taking access from Harmon Road. There are other mining operations in the area. However, they are geographically separated from this mining site, both by distance and terrain. And all other mining sites in the vicinity access off of Hamstring Road, which you'll see here to the east, which then connects to Weddington or Highway 16 West. Those mining sites do not access off of Harmon Road, as is proposed with this one. The entrance to the site is proposed to be near an existing home, which is owned by Mr. Rich at 15792 Harmon Road. Very quickly, I'll go through just the site plans that were submitted by the applicant. I'm sure he'll speak to these more. This is a up-close kind of, and these are just concept plans as we are at the conditional use permit stage. You have the haul road coming into the site. It runs along their northern property line and then kind of goes up this hill and to the mining area. Here's some typical sections for their haul road. Some notes on the proposed entrance and sediment control, and then an overall plan. These are all plans submitted by the applicant. This project was initially heard and tabled at a Planning Board and Zoning Board of Adjustments meeting on August 7th of 2014. Followed was an informational Planning Board meeting held on site at the Rich property on August 26th. The project was then tabled at the request of the applicant at the September and October meetings. The project was heard and denied by the Planning Board at the November 6th meeting. An appeal for this project was filed on December 5th, 2014. The primary reasons for denial at the Planning Board meeting included safety concerns in regard to the proposed location of the Hall Road intersection with Harmon, issues of compatibility, and the high likelihood that this project would be injurious to the use and enjoyment of some of the other property in the surrounding area for purposes already permitted and substantially diminish or impair some property values within the surrounding area. Planning staff recommended denial of the CUP at the November 6th meeting, and at this time is making the same recommendation to the Quorum Court. We ask that you uphold the denial of this proposed conditional use. As you'll see from this map and the information that was submitted to you to review with your packets, that there has been a large neighbor response to this conditional use. The area shown in the orange color are neighbors who contacted us in writing in opposition to the project. You will also note that we did have a neutral comment, and then also one in favor comment were received. I do want you to note that these are just the ones that we received in writing that we could verify the address and location of. If you had a chance to look through the minutes, especially of that first meeting, you'll know that there were many, many people who commented. Some are the same that are represented on this map, and then there are probably additional people as well. We had almost 90 pages of written comments submitted by neighbors. We also created this map so you can see the proximity of actual residences just close to the project. There are more residences as you get further out, but the ones that are just actually in close proximity. As I mentioned in our introduction, if a CUP for this project is approved, the project would be subject to any conditions that went with it, as well as Washington County large-scale development regulations, which would be the next step in the development process if it moved forward. At conditional use permit, we are evaluating whether or not the proposed use is appropriate for this site in the manner that it is proposed, or if it could be made appropriate or compatible with the addition of any conditions. As per our zoning ordinance, we must evaluate the proposed use using the criteria that we've spoken about several times. I went ahead and put this, and all this information was in your staff report, but I went ahead and put the criteria that we feel like they have met. I've showed in green text the application and fees and the notifications. I will note that notifications for a project of this type require 1/2 mile notification, and the initial notification must be certified by certified mail, and then all subsequent notifications are by regular mail. Item 3, that adequate utilities, roads, and drainage and other public services are available and adequate or will be made available and adequate if the use is granted. The location of the proposed Hall Roads intersection with Harmon Road appears to be inadequate in regard to safety. That the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding area. I'm going to talk more about this and show you some slides in just a moment. But staff does have concerns in regard to compatibility due to portions of the proposed site being so close to neighboring property lines, and only relatively small buffer areas are being proposed by the applicant at this time. Additionally, there will be an industrial use added to an area that does not currently have industrial type noise and traffic within this close of a proximity to it. Again, as we discussed a moment ago, there is a mining nearby, and areas that have been mined in the past and are currently being mined, but those are geographically removed by distance and elevation and terrain changes from the currently proposed location. And additionally, their traffic, that mining traffic, goes another route through Hamstring Road and not Harmon Road. The CUP proposes to add an industrial mining type use in an area that has not experienced such a use in such close proximity. Item 5, that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to or endanger public health and safety. The site distance visibility in regard to left-hand turns on the Harmon Road from the site appear to be a health safety issue. A significant amount of information has been submitted, as you saw from your staff report, and your county staff has spent a significant amount of time analyzing the issue. We've analyzed data submitted by the applicant's engineer. We performed our own surveys and had the county contract engineer analyze the data as well. It appears that the currently proposed Hall Road configuration will not accommodate safe left turning movements onto Harmon Road. that the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the surrounding area for purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values. There's much concern from neighboring property owners, which you've read in their comments and in the minutes from prior meetings, and I assume that you will probably hear more of tonight, in regard to their own property values, their quality of life, and other similar issues. Additionally, staff has concerns about the effect of this use on neighboring properties due to the limited buffering we spoke of on Hall Roads and the mining area from surrounding residences and properties. That the establishment of conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding area for uses permitted in the zone. Staff feels that due to a lack of buffering from surrounding properties, development and improvement of surrounding areas, especially neighboring properties, could be impeded in regard to agricultural and residential growth and development. As you can see, safety of turning movements is of high concern. One of the first things I want to talk about is the actual site distances in regard to turning movements from the proposed Hall Road, and some information that we've gotten that was in your staff report, but that has changed since the hearing somewhat in November. First, we're going to look at the turning movements from the Hall Road, proposed Hall Road location, looking south on Harmon Road. Here you can see when you're looking south from this proposed location, you see that there is a vegetative barrier to sight as this road makes a curve and it goes up the hill. This vegetation is not on Mr. Rich's land. It belongs to an adjoining landowner. We spoke initially about the clearing of this area, and because it belongs to a neighboring landowner, it would require an easement both for the initial clearing of that brush and then also an easement for the life of the project that would allow that brush to be maintained, to be cleared, if that was the route that they were going to use to maintain site visibility. They were not able to get that easement. The site distance that was submitted to us by Mr. Kelly, the engineer for the applicant, from looking at the Hall Road, looking south, is 446.36 feet. The site distance required in regard to truck traffic at the 45 miles per hour for intersection site distance is 628.4 feet. So they are lacking in the site distance needed in this area. Next, looking north from the Hall Road location. In this location, it actually looks like site distance is impeded, but they actually have much better site distance in this location due to the nature of this hill. When there's a car on it, it's kind of a shallow rise, and so you can actually see the car for quite a bit longer. The site distance that was submitted to us by the applicant was greater than 500 feet. The site distance required at 45 miles per hour for the truck traffic situation at an intersection site distance is 562 feet. While he doesn't specify what it is greater than 500, we checked this site distance ourselves, as we also checked the other one that he submitted, and we found it to be 640 feet approximately. So we do feel like they have site distance in the north direction, just not looking south from the intersection. As you may have read in the minutes and in discussion at that meeting, November 6th, there were some differences in findings between their engineer and ours. At that meeting, we were using the data that their engineer had surveyed and creating design speeds, or our engineer evaluated their data for design speeds After that meeting, county staff had decided it would be best for us to perform our own survey of the site to check our data against what was submitted by the applicant. In December, the road department performed a survey of the area, and the county contract engineer used this new data to formulate his own plan and profile sheet of the subject section of Harmon Road. This resulted in the January 29th, 2015 plan and profile sheet and letter of findings submitted by the county engineer that was in your packet. Also at the November 6th meeting, the applicant's engineer, Mike Kelly, was unhappy with the fact that some of the calculations provided by planning staff and the contract county engineer were derived from an earlier version of the manual that we were using, the AASHTO Green Book, a policy on geometric design of highways and streets. In order to avoid any confusion, the county contract engineer figured the calculations resulting in the plan profile sheet you see on the screen and the information in your packet based on the 2011 6th edition of this manual, which was the same edition that their engineer used as well. You'll see on here, you have a plan of the road, and then you have a profile, which is going to show your elevation change. And then you have design speeds that were figured based on the characteristics of the road as it exists in certain sections of the road. Right here you'll see is the approximate location of the center line of the proposed haul road. Mr. Grody is going to be able to answer questions and speak more to this after I finish my presentation. So I'm just going to give you a synopsis, and if you have detailed engineering questions, I would ask you to address them to him. By doing the survey work and analysis, our engineer found the following. 45 miles per hour is the posted speed for this section of Harmon Road. The findings do not warrant a change in the posted speed of 45 miles per hour for this section of Harmon. The proposed haul road does not have enough sight distance to safely make left turns onto Harmon Road. The sight distance needed to make the left turn from the haul road onto a 45 mile per hour roadway is 628 feet. According to the information submitted by the developer, the proposed site has a current intersection sight distance from the location of the haul road looking south of 446 feet. Mr. Kelly, the engineer for the applicant, has also submitted his own design speeds. But Mr. Grody and planning staff and the road departments do not agree with his calculations, and we stand by our own. Mr. Grody can explain his reasoning after my presentation. Staff will now discuss primary concerns and issues with this project. I want to give you a little bit, we talked just a minute about the updates in the engineering information since the November 6th meeting. I want to go backwards a little bit and explain to you kind of how the site visibility issues came to be through this process. It's been a long process. It started in July, and so I just want to kind of go with you really quick, go through with you really quickly how we got to that point. Site visibility and safety aspect regarding the proposed entrance on the Harmon for this project have been issues of high concern since the project was initially submitted. This portion of Harmon Road is posted at 45. There is a curve advisory sign of 25 miles per hour preceding the curves south of the proposed entrance. However, the county usually uses the posted speed limit of 45 to determine the intersection sight distances needed for all developments unless actual design speeds are available. The county uses a table from our code in Chapter 11, Article 4, Appendix A. This table was actually adopted from the AASHTO standards, that same engineering manual that we were discussing earlier, to determine what the minimum sight distance is for the intersection needed at certain speeds. Now, we'll say that this table is a general table that's based on most scenarios where you have a majority of passenger car traffic. As per our code, when looking at this table, not taking into consideration a majority of truck traffic, the minimum sight distance required was 500 feet for left-turning movements and 430 for right or straight. It became evident early in the process that the applicant did not have 500 feet of sight visibility to the south in order to be able to safely make those left-turning movements. The below options were given to the applicant to address sight visibility in regard to their proposed access points. Option A, they could pursue an alternative drive location that met the required sight distance for the posted speed limit. Option B, they could work to determine the design speed for this stretch of Harmon and then submit that information to us to evaluate in regard to looking at the posted speed for that section of road. Or option C, which was a clearing and off-site easement option. They did choose option B. I will say that they worked at option C to try to obtain that. It just did not end up working out for them. When they chose to pursue option B, their engineer, Mr. Kelly, submitted documentation via plan and profile sheet, like I showed you a minute ago, showing a series of design speeds for an 1,800-foot stretch of Harmon Road. Mr. Kelly also submitted the intersection sight distances that we just discussed. As mentioned, when we use the AASHTO manual for truck traffic, there's a different coefficient basically that you use to calculate when truck traffics are making turns onto a road because they are generally slower in making that turn. So you calculate in basically some extra seconds that they're using to make those turning movements. Using that time gap coefficient that's appropriate for the proposed type of truck traffic at this site, we calculated the sight distance needed for those left-hand movements are as follows. And we talked about what we did after that meeting and the conclusions that we've come to since that time. Basically, that it's not a safe situation. Due to all those reasons that were discussed, planning staff still feels that there's a true safety concern regarding the location of the proposed drive and haul road. The second primary issue of concern is the buffering from surrounding properties in regard to noise, quality of life, property values, and incompatibility of uses. Planning staff still has some concerns regarding the lack or minimal width of proposed buffers on site, especially in the area of the proposed haul road. The applicant has attempted to move the haul road away from the neighboring property line to some degree, but the haul road is still within 35 feet or less from the neighboring property line for approximately 400 feet. We're talking about this area right here. While 28 to 35 foot, that measurement varies, may seem like a somewhat substantial width of land, staff feels that with the impact of 100 dump truck trips per day, further buffer may be needed for the surrounding properties. The applicant has also offered to place a 3-foot berm with cedar trees on top of it for the first 230 feet along the haul road. Should be approximately this portion. Staff feels that a berm could be effective, but feels like that it should likely be taller than 3 feet in height and extend to at least 400 feet in length. Additionally, the location of the berm should be considered carefully, as none of the existing fence line vegetation should be disturbed, so that existing vegetation screen remains in place. While the mining site itself appears to be primarily tucked away from the site of general public, this is the mining site up here, the hatched area, there are 2 adjacent property lines to the south and then to the west that are owned by different parties. So you have the west and then the south. Staff did note that both of these areas contain a high amount of existing vegetation, so the planting of additional vegetation is not needed if the existing vegetation is left undisturbed in these areas. However, staff recommends that a 150-foot buffer be proposed between these properties and all parts of the operation. The addition of berms could also be beneficial. At present, the applicant is proposing only a 50-foot buffer from the southern property line, which borders the Casey property and the University of Arkansas property. Additionally, more buffering or berming along the western property line, which borders the Elkins property, should also be explored. Due to the intensity of traffic and operations of a dirt pit, staff is hesitant to recommend less than 100 to 150 feet wide buffers along all adjoining property lines. And just to be noted, 100 to 150 feet is in line. That is in line with what we have recommended and approved in the past for other industrial and mining conditional use permits, like the Northwest Arkansas Quarry and Big Red. We also have concern regarding impact to Harmon Road and the possible need for road improvements to accommodate the proposed use. We will ask that if the conditional use permit is approved, staff recommends that a formal traffic study be required at the large-scale development stage. The below information was given to the applicant at the county's technical review. A formal traffic study would be required at large-scale development if the CUP is approved. The applicant will be required to pay for any needed improvements specified in the study, as well as acquire any needed right-of-way. The traffic should cover but not be limited to the following elements: directional division of the proposed truck traffic, like whether they're going north or south on Harmon, level of service that the road would experience, impact to the intersection of Highway 16 and Harmon Road, and impact on and interactions with the existing Weddington Woods intersection, Washington County 2161 Dogwood, which is to the north. And also the change in percentage of trucks versus cars on Harmon Road. Additionally, a pavement analysis for Harmon Road would be required once formal traffic loading had been determined. Harmon Road also belongs to the city of Fayetteville for the first quarter mile from the intersection of Highway 16, and discussion of any improvements needed must be coordinated with the city for their portion of the preliminary large scale. We also have concern regarding debris and tracking on Harmon Road, especially in inclement weather situations. County staff is concerned about this issue, especially due to the large amount of traffic that currently travels Harmon Road. If you're not familiar with it, it is a major collector that runs on that side of the county. It definitely has more through traffic, much more than a road like Hamstring has that's carrying that mining traffic to the east. The applicant has specified that they would build a tire wash on site to help mitigate the issue, but we're unsure of the details of that tire wash at this time. The applicant has also made several statements in their plan that they will not track and will shut down in inclement weather. However, staff needs more details and a more fully defined policy and plan from the applicant to review in regard to safeguards against trucks tracking on Harmon. Environmental concerns.
Juliet?
Yes, sir.
You feel okay?
Yeah. Do I sound bad? I'm sorry.
No, you're
Powering through. I started losing my voice earlier.
Yeah.
All right. Environmental concerns. Concern regarding the proximity to the U of A site on Harmon. The proposed mining site is close in proximity, directly adjacent to, in this one corner, the University of Arkansas site on Harmon. If some of you probably know the history of this site, some of you don't. It was used for storage of radioactive film of some sorts in the 70s and 80s, from what I understand. We did contact the University of Arkansas regarding any possible environmental issues that could arise in regard to this dirt mining proposal's proximity to the University of Arkansas's land on Harmon Road. The reason we were concerned about this is because we knew that there was some contamination to the soil, and we had some concerns about how far that contamination went, especially since the proposal is to remove large amounts of soil on an adjacent site, and concern about whether that contamination might be there or there could be problems with disturbing it. So that was why we started to look into this. As per staff, our conversation with the University of Arkansas staff, we understand that all radioactive materials that were on the site in the past have now been removed and the site has been cleaned up. The only restriction remaining on the site is a deed restriction stating that a water well cannot be drilled on the university's property. This is not due to any radioactivity concerns, but due to a small amount of chemical contamination in the perched groundwater on a location on the specific site. The university does not want someone drilling through the perched water and into the aquifer. This deed restriction and concerns to the perched water, according to the University of Arkansas, are specific only to the university's parcel of land and not to any surrounding parcels. We also got an official response from the university, which sounds just like you probably think it would. They're happy to make documentation available to us. They do not believe that they should make any type of blanket warranties or representations regarding any of its property or adjacent properties. As they understand it, ADQ worked with the university as officials of the institution oversaw the cleanup of the Harmon Road site and that the process was completed some time ago, and that they have a neutral stance on this permit review. I will say that I also spoke with several people at ADEQ and was lucky enough to actually find someone who worked on the actual cleanup of this site. They were in the hazardous waste division at this time. They're not any longer. But we talked at length about the way that this property is situated, the terrain, and the types of soil testing that they did around there. And while nobody's going to make 100% warranty that everything is, fine and there's not contamination anywhere, he felt like if there was going to be contamination, it wouldn't be leaching in the direction of basically this development where mining is proposed. So I will say that in general, I feel better about that situation in regard to a possible mining permit, but the facts are kind of basically what they are, that it looks good, but nobody's going to give it 100% stamp of no contamination anywhere. Other environmental concerns were brought up by property owners in the area were drainage, wildlife, and stormwater. Staff did not have any specific concerns in regard to those. I did want to address, and finally, I'm on the tail end here, the actual appeal document that was filed. I feel like in this presentation I've gone over these items, but I want to just go ahead and talk about several things that the appellant brought up. They stated the following: safety, all designs are set for 45 miles per hour per zoning staff unless the applicant could prove Harmon Road does not meet 45 mile per hour design. They stated our engineer surveyed the site and stamped the drawing stating the existing horizontal and vertical alignments for Harmon Road meet only a 20 mile per hour design. Immediately preceding the hearing, staff changed the site distance requirement from 500 feet to 628 feet, which they say was not a current ordinance, without properly notifying the applicant prior to the hearing. We've talked about several times what our engineer found in regard to the design speeds. He feels like after looking at the design speed for that stretch of road, that 45 miles per hour is the correct design speed or posted speed for that road. Also, I will have to say that we do try to keep good communication with the applicant. The information that we found out are found in the AASHTO manual, which he had his own AASHTO manual as well, that was in regard to specific scenarios like this, where you have primarily truck traffic utilizing that minor road, and that you should be using a different time gap coefficient to figure what that sight distance is, what sight distance is needed for that situation. That was something that we found just the day before the planning board meeting. And when we found it, Mr. Strum and I, Mr. Strum's the assistant road superintendent, we went over it, checked our numbers, and then sent it that evening to our county engineer to review to make sure that we were reading it correctly. He reviewed it and got back to us the next day, which was the actual day of the planning board meeting, and we finally solidified that information just a few hours before the planning board meeting. We actually emailed an update to the planning board just a couple hours before. And I will say that we tried to keep clear lines of communication. And while it is staff's job to notify the planning board and quorum court of findings of this nature, we're not under any obligation to share findings that we find an hour before the meeting. While reviewing the conditional use permit, one criteria to be met is that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health and safety. The CUP does not hold staff to road development standards only found in our current ordinance. In this case, we used the AASHTO Green Book as it was the best tool available to evaluate the safety for this particular combination of use and intersection situation. For staff to ignore the use of the larger time gap coefficient for single unit trucks in the sight distance equation, which is what equated the larger distance of sight distance needed than originally calculated, would have been negligent on our part. They also state compatibility, that the site is situated between a U of A hazardous waste site adjacent to Harmon Road on the west and existing rock quarry and dirt pit mines on the east, as well as having previous pits under reclamation on the applicant owner's 123-acre farm. Staff determination of non-compatibility issue is being challenged. We request the zoning staff's basis for the determination of incompatibility. They also say injurious to surrounding property owners, property already permitted. Applicant has an open pit mining permit in effect on his land for reclamation purposes. We request the zoning staff basis for the determination of significantly affecting property values. It is our contention that some will actually increase in value. Both of these issues were covered in the November staff report for this project and iterated by staff at the November 6th meeting. They were also covered in depth in the report that was given to you, and we just went over all of them. There's the issue of compatibility in regard to relatively small buffer areas, which, for the record, staff encouraged the applicant over and over to increase those buffer areas, and they were not interested in that. We also brought up multiple issues as far as there are other existing mining sites in the area, but they are separated. And then also the route that traffic takes from the other mining projects goes on Hamstring Road. I feel like we have adequately addressed everything that they've brought up, and we are making a recommendation, as I said, for denial of this conditional use permit. Both Sean Strum from the road department and Clay Grody, our staff engineer, are going to follow up with any, I guess, more technical questions that you might have. And that's all I have, unless you have any further questions for me.
Eva?
Since I always view this meeting as the opportunity to get all the information that I don't already have, I wanted to ask why, if the speed limit on the curve is posted at 25, why did you all decide that it wasn't possible to just lower the speed to 25, which seems to address the site concerns? Because you said that it wouldn't be good to change the posted speed, so I'm curious about that. Because we want people to be going 25 on the curve as it is, so.
Well, I think I'm going to let Sean or Clay answer that. There's an engineering side to that answer, and then there's also road management side. And
Well, I know in part it's a collector, so we don't really want it to be 25. But if for safety reasons we want the curve to be 25, I'm curious. Mr. Shrum, can you come up and address the speed limit issue?
Well, on the speed limit issue, you think about you drive down a state highway or a county road. Whenever you come to a curve, you don't see a speed limit sign change.
Right.
You don't go from 55 down to 35. You see a advisory sign, which are the curve signs or, the yellow and black signs.
That I view as more of a guideline.
That's right. Yes, exactly. And this particular stretch, we do have it advised at 25 miles an hour, but yet the speed limit is 45. So if you're driving a UPS truck, you're not going to be able to make that curve at a higher rate of speed or as high a rate of speed as a car. So it is an advisory, but especially on a major collector road, you don't want to up the speed limit, down the speed limit, up and down based on a straight stretch than a curve.
But I understood from the staff report that somebody made the decision that the posted speed limit should not be changed from 45 to 25, which I think would address the site visibility. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the rationale for saying, I'm not talking about the curve and the advisory warning, but what's the rationale behind saying you can't reduce the speed limit and solve this problem? Perhaps it's because you don't think, or staff doesn't think that reducing the speed limit will solve the problem, because I sort of thought that it would, at least for visibility. You're saying no, Ms. Ritchie. But the other thing is, or it may be that you think the appropriate speed limit for a road of this type is 45, and then it shouldn't be 25. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. What's the reason for not saying a reduction in this posted speed limit would solve this?
Well, and that's where, like I said, especially a major collector, it's not good practice to lower the speed limit. One, the traffic's coming through there. A lower speed limit, honestly, how many people are going to drop down to 25 miles an hour? They're not going to do it. You can take this curve, like I said, depending on what you're driving, at a higher rate of speed. Dropping the speed limit, that may be the speed limit, but people aren't going to go that. And so that's still an unsafe situation.
But what I hear you saying is, at least from road department perspective, that you all think the posted speed should be 45 for this type of road.
Yes, that is correct.
And then would you come back and talk about, or you can stay there, I guess, if you want. You all think that maybe lowering the speed limit wouldn't solve the problem. Well, I'm just talking about the visibility issue, obviously.
Right. Well, and I think Clay can address this more, but I think part of that is, so when design speeds were evaluated, and Clay can talk to you more about exactly everything that goes into that. I mean, you're looking at how the road is actually laid out, what the vertical and horizontal curves are, how the road is sloped, and you're figuring out what the actual design speeds are. And as you can see, they're all higher, according to Clay's calculations, than 25. And they vary down there. Like that 35 miles per hour, that's when you're first going into that curve. Then 33, you're in it. And then by the time you're at the Hall Road intersection location, it's up to 58. And I can tell you, just because we spent a lot of time out there evaluating that, just from driving that curve over and over to see how it is. The way that curve is, it's very steep. You can see you get above a 17% slope at its steepest. When you're going through that curve, when you hit a curve, you brake naturally, right? You press your brakes because you think, oh, this feels a little unsafe at this speed. And because of the slope of that, the minute that and then when you're coming through the curve, there's a moment where you're like, okay, I don't need to brake anymore, right? Because you're evening back out. But because of the slope of that, the minute you take your foot off the brake from that, what I would call like a natural braking maneuver, and this is all my non-engineering speak, then your speed shoots up because you're on such a steep slope, and you're going much faster. Not by accelerating, not by depressing the accelerator, but just by releasing the brake as you're coming out of that curve. By the time you get to that intersection, you really are going quite fast. And so, to me, to talk about re-signing that. I think there's just such a small portion in it, and I'll let Clay speak to engineering and policy, where you're actually going much slower than it doesn't make sense to sign a road for a tiny stretch where, you have something lower, but still you have 35 and 33. It's not even 25. And then you're shooting up higher again, just, right after you get out of that.
Well, that makes it, and I think the slope probably means you maybe couldn't go 25.
Yeah.
But
And there are different things too that that AASHTO manual, it takes into consideration a lot of things, and that particular type of curve, Clay can tell you again more, is called a vertical sag curve. Is that right, Clay? And that manual even specifically says, in cases where you have that kind of curve preceding on the major road, preceding an intersection, you should even look at possibly using more caution and greater sight distance, even than we've calculated with the trucks because of that, I think, exact situation.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned that part of Harmon Road is city?
Yes.
Okay.
The first quarter mile, if you're on Highway 16 and you turn onto Harmon, that first quarter mile is city.
Okay. And so how does that, I'm just trying to figure out how that impacts us. You brought it up because in terms of improvements to Harmon Road would have to go through the city, but that's sort of suggests to me that this area could become city. Is that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about that.
Okay.
This is quite a ways from there. I guess what I was saying was that if a majority of that, one of the things they'd have to look at in a traffic study is the direction that traffic's going to be going. If a majority of it's going toward Highway 16, and it was enough traffic to necessitate intersection improvement for where Harmon meets 16, because that portion of Harmon, like let's say maybe it necessitated a turning lane. Does that make sense? Like then what I was saying is that they would need to work. We want to make it a condition at conditional use that they would have to work with the city at large scale, because technically the city's not part of this process because the project's in the county unless we make them
and
part
it's
of the
not
process.
in the growth area.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, can we go to the map? Because that's sort of the last of my questions is just about the map. And I kind of wanted to figure out, make sure I know exactly what the surrounding areas are. And I'm trying to find the right map.
Which one do you want?
If we can go to, I think any of the maps. But it looks to me, this is on the one where you've got, I think it was the third map. It's labeled A16 on our packet. You can see it from there, but I think what I'm trying to figure out is where the existing rich red dirt property is. It's they obviously own this property, but it's outlined in red, and it looks like there is some type of mining excavation work extending outside of that. And is that the Rogers Group property? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so it looks like, if I'm understanding this, it looks like right now, at least some of the folks objecting are actually also doing mining work. Am I reading that right? Because it looks like from the neighbor comments that you've got the property to the east and to the sort of the south in that little cutout. So what you've labeled 48 and 40. Can you see those?
Yeah, on 48, let's see. I believe, and I don't want to speak 100%, 40 should be fully under reclamation. What happened was, this whole area, the part that's now Rogers Group, hold on, let me get where I can see this here. Okay. All of this dirt area that's kind of around the Rogers, where I've outlined Rogers Group.
Right.
That was part of John David Lindsay's mining operation before he went through bankruptcy or whatever. I don't know. He actually owned the property also, or an LLC of his, that Rogers Group was on, and they leased the quarrying area from them. When they went through bankruptcy, from what I understand, all of their areas of dirt mining, which is what these red disturbed looking areas are, quit being mined. And then, I don't know, not right after or whatever. And some of those were John David Lindsay's land, and some of them were land with other people that he had leases with, including Mr. Rich, and I think this is Miss Crumley's land that he leased from her. And then it gets into a little bit of what's now Sherry Main's land, but actually at the time belonged to someone else.
Well, are there any active?
I don't think that any
operations on
of
that?
these are active right here.
Okay.
To my knowledge, these are all under reclamation because they went through bankruptcy. ADQ is actually doing the actual reclamation with bond money, which I don't think there was enough of, and it has gone or is going very slowly. Now, I don't want to speak exactly about Mr. Rich's land because I don't know. I know I've talked to Miss Crumley anyway, but that's what I believe is happening, is that all of that's under reclamation. But I could be wrong. And the only thing that's active on that site that used to be John David Lindsay's is still being actively mined is the actual rock quarrying part, which is the white part.
And none of that accesses to Harmon.
No. None of this ever did. It all went to Hamstring. Like this area on Mr. Rich's that was mined, it went out Hamstring because Mr. Lindsay owned all this property, so he had a path to Hamstring.
Okay.
Now
So-
that Rogers Group owns this all now, and there is no longer a path for Mr. Rich to get to Hamstring.
So so for the Maine and the Crumley properties, 48 and 40 on the map, am I correct then that for those to resume any type of work like this, that they would have to go through something?
Yes.
They would have to come to you all?
Yes.
Okay. So if you go to the lower red line of the site property, you've got the university on the far west, and then you've got the Casey property, and they're actually in favor. There's the only one. And then it looks like we've got somebody north of Maine. I don't know if there's one little parcel. Well, there's another little sliver of a square of Maine down 48.
Yes.
Right there. There's somebody up there that I guess we just didn't hear from. Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, right. We didn't hear from him.
So it looks to me like the bulk of the objections are the residential people that are on Harmon.
Yes.
Okay. And that's just because it's all going to dump onto Harmon.
Yes. And I would say 34, that's where those property owners stand to be impacted by that location of that Hall Road. 34, because the Hall
Okay.
Road's proposed right on this north line.
And that's where the berms would be too, right? The
Yes.
proposed berms. Okay. And I think you said it, but you looked for alternate access, other road possibilities, and there's no real way to do that any other way.
Well, they'd have access to Rich's Road. They chose not to pursue that option.
Okay, and that's the one that we see, if I'm looking at the more detailed map, that's in yellow. So that's Washington County 841?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Well,
And
then
that's not to say that it wouldn't have its own issues. I'm just saying it wasn't evaluated because that's not what they chose to move forward to. But they have legal access to that. It's a county road. They have frontage on that road.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ritchie.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Other questions for Juliet?
Anything else? Yes.
I just have two quick questions for you. One is the impromptu use of the heavy traffic or heavy truck coefficients. I'm assuming since those were just discovered kind of prior to that planning board meeting, that those have not been used in any other calculations in the county for any of these kind of use permits.
No, well, I can't say never because I haven't been here forever, but we have not used them in the past, but we haven't had the same site visibility issues. You know, if they can generally meet those, what we have, then we don't.
Okay. And then one other question on the speed limit map that you have up there that was just there. and I apologize, I've been out to the site, but I don't remember the speed limits. What are the actual posted speed limits in that 35 and 33 mile an hour?
It's 45 is the posted, and there's a 25 mile per hour advisory. That's in the curve, the 25 miles before you get into the curve.
Okay, thank you.
Rick?
The existing permit that Mr. Rich has for reclamation purposes, how much truck traffic does that generate out on Harmon Road?
It doesn't generate any on Harmon Road. That accesses to Hamstring, but I don't really know much about that
Okay.
permit.
But it's nowhere near the activity of what we're looking at for this permit that we're,
I don't know if I could answer that.
Okay.
Well, that would probably be a better question for him.
I'll check with them. Thank you.
Any other questions for Juliet? Thank you, dear. I think the next thing we have is Mr. Grody. Thank you, Clay.
Good evening. I'm Clay Grody. I'm the contract county engineer. I'm on my 10th year at this job. So we've come a long way. What we did after the meeting for the CUP at Planning Commission is we decided, hey, it's best for us to go out and survey the site ourselves. Mr. Kelly, the engineer for Rich's Red Dirt Pit, he initially did his own survey, and he mentioned in a meeting that he took over 200 shots to get that profile of the road. We went out and took over 500 shots, 533 shots, and shots meaning elevation spots down the road so we can model this road. In general, rule of thumb, the more shots you make, the better, the more accurate you can evaluate the road for its vertical and horizontal alignment. So that's what we did. So you'll see a variation between my drawing and his drawing, such as the length of curves and that sort of thing. But for the most part, we're somewhat modeling the same road. I then took that data with the Green Book 6th edition and modeled the vertical and horizontal alignment of that curve of the road based on its curves. And I feel as though that the posted speed of 45 miles an hour is correct, and this is and probably the biggest reason why is the location of that proposed drive is in the area that has a design speed of greater than 45 miles an hour. It's actually 58 miles an hour. So although there is a curve to the north that's evaluated at, I came up with 33 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. The advisory posted speed there is 25 miles an hour. Once you leave that curve, that straight stretch of road has a design speed greater than 45 miles an hour. So I feel as though 45 miles an hour is the correct design speed for that location.
Any questions for Clay?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else from Sean?
Do any one of you have questions for Sean? Okay, thank you. Steve?
Judge, we've been at it almost an hour and a half, and I don't know if the court would please to recess at this point, or we want to keep going, or
Do you guys want to recess, or do you want to keep on going? Keep on going? Okay.
then the next part of the agenda is for the applicant, the appellant. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Zaga. Good evening, Your Honor, Judge Edwards, Mr. Zaga, members of the Quorum Court. My name is Todd Lewis. I'm a local attorney here in Fayetteville. I live in the county myself. I've been in this county for 22 years. I represent Benny Holtzclaw. I've known Benny for 30-plus years. And I'm here just to give a brief opening statement. I want Benny to say a few words, and then I'm
going to turn it over to Mr. Kelly. You heard Mr. Kelly mentioned a number of times, and I think Mr. Kelly's here to give some detailed information based on these design speeds that we saw tonight were varying between 25, 30, 33 miles an hour for that curve. Let me just kind of mention, first of all, Benny grew up here, born here, raised here. He's been, and he'll tell you how long he's been doing it. He's been doing this a long time. He's a member of this community. And has been doing this very thing many, many times. 7 different occasions he's done similar red dirt pits. As a member of the community, he's not here to come in, run this thing in the ground, go file bankruptcy, run out of state and leave. That's not what he's done 7 times, and that's not what he's going to do, hopefully here on the 8th time. How we got here is, as you saw from the presentation, there's a rock quarry adjacent to this property. On the same property, there has been red dirt activity. It's not currently being reclamated, but it's been used as a red dirt pit in the past, as you saw from the aerials. The Rogers Group owns that rock quarry, which is extremely loud, extremely dirty. I think everybody knows what a rock quarry is, and no offense to them, that's what they do for a living, and that's fine. They have a permit for it, and good for them. What Benny tried to do was he contacted the senior vice president of the Rogers Group on 2 separate occasions trying to get some kind of deal worked out with them where he could go out that direction. So he would pull in through the Rogers Quarry on an appropriate spot off Hamstring Road. 2 separate occasions he was told no. And that was their business. That's their property. They can decide who comes on and off, and he respected that decision. So where does he go next? Well, there's Richards Road, and Mr. Kelly and Mr. Holtzclaw can talk a little bit more about that, but that's got houses right on it, as you can see from the aerial. So that leaves really no choice but Harmon Road. So Harmon Road's it for him. As you heard, there have been red dirt pit mines in this area. You saw the aerial photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, the red dirt in this part of the county is going fast. It's, by the way, it's what we use to build buildings, what we use to build roads. Without it, we don't build stuff in this area. Those pits are emptying out. There's only one left out there that has any really red dirt activity being pulled out of it. And if we don't have red dirt in this county, or at least this part of the county, then you're going to have to go north to Bentonville or north to Benton County or north Washington County, but it's just not going to be in this county much longer, this part of the county, I should say. So, that's where we're at. As you saw the location, it's next to what used to be a radioactive pit or mine or area. It's next to a quarry, and, it's in the neighborhood. Now, I'll talk quickly about compatibility, and I want to turn it over to Mr. Kelly and then Benny as well. This is what this property's been. It's been a red dirt mine, and it's located right in the neighborhood. Now, I understand and I can fully appreciate the folks behind me are going to say, well, not in my neighborhood. And, probably in my life I've said those same words. I have. But at the same token, this neighborhood does have red dirt mines in it and quarries in it and other things in it. And I have to say that if there's anyone who is going to do it right, who's going to be the best person to run this, it's Benny. And he's going to do it right. He's always done it right. He's got people who in this community who've been doing business with him for 10, 20, 30 years willing to speak tonight. As a man of his word, he does what he said he's going to do. Red dirt pits are going to be in this area. It's just the way this county is situated, the way this earth's situated. And so if you're going to have someone do it, he's your guy. So, I guess I want to add a couple more quick points and turn it over. There's been a little bit of talk about a buffer. As y'all heard ADEQ, that's our environmental quality agency for the state of Arkansas. They require a 50-foot buffer or even less on certain occasions, and Benny doesn't want to go any closer to what the state says on that. And that buffer would be next to the one gentleman who says he's in favor of this project. And you see in your packet, it's going to be a slope. It's not going to be a wall. And it's going to be something that's going to be on a 3-to-1. So it's going to work out to the point where what is a berm right there, a very large berm, will be brought down level. And The upside, another upside of this is, and if those who've been out there could testify to this, once you're at the spot where this pit's going to be, you're really far up in there, and it is almost impossible to see anything else other than trees, and you're pretty well distanced inside of that area. So, again, I know that there's going to be a lot of people opposed to this tonight. I can just see from the head count outside and in the room. You've got a tough job to say no to people who are saying, I don't want it in my neighborhood. I understand that. But this is a court, and I trust this court will treat everyone fairly and can make a tough decision if need be. And finally, Benny's willing to work with everybody here. He's willing to work with what you think is the best interest of not only this property, but those out there and the county in generally. So with that, I'd like to introduce Benny Holtzclaw. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm
Please
Benny
identify-
Holtzclaw.
okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the owner of Holtzclaw Excavating. I've lived in Washington County my entire life. I have 37 years experience in the excavating business. I've been affiliated with 7 dirt pits. We've actually operated or ran them, 7 different pits. This is what we do, part of our business. And there's just a great need for this. There's only one pit right now. And, we need this pit. In fact, you guys are sitting on my red dirt right now for this building. We hauled red dirt for this building right here with Canart Construction. But hope you will consider this. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
How long do you think this pit is going to last? What are you looking at?
Say 4 to 6 years.
The other pits that you have operated, have you restored the earth back to use?
We're in the process of doing one right now. It was a pit that he sold dirt, Mr. Luttrell's pit on 16. We've hauled dirt out of there for over 30 years, but he's also let other people haul dirt out of there. For the past probably 6 years, I've talked him into being over it, and now I'm helping him reclaim it right now. We have a contract with the city of Fayetteville. They're bringing all of their waste dirt there, and it's going to take a long time to reclaim it. There's been over 2 million yards taken out of his pit.
But you said you've operated 7 different pits.
I've
and you're only
owned
working at restoring one.
Well, no, I own one of my own, and then the other pits I just buy dirt from people, and I've only owned one of my own. But I've ran, we've taken dirt out of them.
But the restoration, you have not, or the owners have not restored those back to use?
Well, some of them have been sold. One of them is the white pit that Johnny Tyson bought. It hasn't been restored.
Are there plans to restore them?
I don't know about that. This is the property owners. I'm helping the Luttrells with theirs just because I've been there so long.
That's my questions. Thank you, Benny.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Ava.
I wanted to ask, and I hope this is an appropriate question for you, but why Rich's Road wasn't considered? I realize that the main family owns property on that and has objected, but I am curious about that.
I just felt like there were so many houses on that road. You just go right down the road, and there's with this location, it's back up on top of a hill, away from everybody. I just felt like there were too many houses on Rich's Road.
Do you know? This may be I need to ask Mr. Shrum, but do you know what the speed limit is on Rich's?
Rich's Road is probably, if it's not posted, it'll be
Okay. Okay. Well, because the only reason I say that is because it looks like the property encompasses a part of Rich's Road already, if I'm looking at it correctly, and then the next closest property owner, Rich's, didn't even give us an opinion. So I just looked like maybe a path of less resistance. I don't know, but I just wanted to ask. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but who is responsible for reclamation? Is it, in fact, the landowner? Does anyone know?
The landowner,
The landowner is responsible.
or whoever has, in this case, it'll be me. And what we plan on doing is, we'll strip the topsoil off of it and store it on the back. And this pit won't be, we're not going to dig it to limestone. It will be a 15 to 20 foot cut with a 3-to-1 slope, and where this big knoll is, it'll just be flattened. We'll take the topsoil and put it back.
I guess I want to follow up with another just comment, and part of what we're trying to determine when these conditional uses that Juliet asked us to follow and Steve Zega is, item 7 is the establishment of the conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding area for uses permitted in the zone. So I guess one concern I have for the surrounding property owners is the fact that the land that has been used and is being reclaimed right now is not being reclaimed by the same property owner that wants to start another pit. And so I think it's germane to the conditional uses that we have to follow here to be concerned about what sort of insurance the surrounding property owners would have that you would in fact reclaim that. Now, I just wonder if someone would speak
There will
to
be
that.
a bond. Whoever has the permit, they're responsible for it. If they don't reclaim it, then the bond money, then they reclaim it with the bond money. But in this case, this property is actually going to be better because it's just a big hill. If you can visualize a 3-to-1 slope and then 9 acres of flat land, and then it'll have grass back on it. You're not going to see limestone boulders. It will actually be a better piece of property because he has no use for it right now. I mean, you could run some cows or goats on it, but that's about it. But it's up to whoever has the permit. They're responsible for the reclamation.
So I guess my follow-up question then, just briefly, would be who determines how much bond? Is that something that you determine?
That'll be the ADQ. However many acres, it's so many acres.
John, I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Mr. Holtzclaw is right. That whoever gets the permit from ADEQ is ultimately responsible for reclamation. And ADEQ, there's a formula they use per acre for how much they require for the bond. And I don't remember. At one time it was $50,000 an acre, but I don't know that that's correct anymore. What I do know is that if the permit holder goes bankrupt, the bond is static. In other words, they buy a bond once, it's there forever. And if the price of reclamation goes up, but the bond remains the same, you can have a gap that's essentially not filled, and ADEQ is then responsible to reclaim the rest.
Ann?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. We've got a lot of pits out here that were mined before the law was passed that they had to be reclaimed. So those are, we've got, the one at West Fork is there. It does not have to be reclaimed, but all new pits have to be reclaimed. That's just, general information because I don't think maybe everybody realized this, that a lot of those pits out there were grandfathered in.
Yes, ma'am.
Eva?
Mr. Ritchie, you said, though, that the bonds are not sufficient to reclaim what's there right now, right?
I've been told by, ADQ that I know that there were gaps in those bonds for John David Lindsay's property. I don't know the full story on that. I've heard rumors, I don't know if it was because
Of the bankruptcy or
or if ADQ didn't do a good job of following up to make sure that his bonds weren't expiring. I don't know. I've heard several different things. You might know more about that than I do, and I also don't know exactly who held that permit for Mr. Rich's property. Was that Mr. Lindsay?
I think so.
As well. And so if that was so, I don't know why that's not being reclaimed if it's part of that.
I think Mark just hasn't pursued it right now.
Okay.
I think it is Lindsay, but you'll have to ask him about that.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Yes, Harvey.
I guess I've got 2 or 3 questions. First thing, in looking at the map and the situation there, the small county road that dead ends into your property, looks like it'll be far fewer people that would be impacted by that route out than it would on the collector road with all these neighborhoods. And I've driven Harmon from all the way from Tawnytown all the way down that way. And there's a great deal of really nice homes and a lot of traffic flow, I'm sure, north and south there. Whereas that small county road coming out of there would probably not affect more than a half dozen to a dozen families. And that would appear to me to be far less impactful on the number of people affected by that route.
And you're talking about Rich's Road?
Yes.
Use Rich's rather than...
Yes. I guess the other issue, it would appear to me that coming out on Harmon Road is probably the worst of 3 options that I'd see it. I guess the first question I'd have about the deal with Rogers, was that answered no, or a conditional deal based on what the price will be for transit through there?
I don't know. I contacted the vice president twice, and he just said not at this time. He said we're not interested. And
so what any discussion about price to do that is just a matter of no is the answer. Okay. Well, I guess that Richards Road, or whatever you call it, coming out of there, in my opinion, would affect far fewer people and reduce the number of possibilities of casualties or accidents impacting the neighbors.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have a couple questions. Of course, my concern is really with Harmon Road. I just think that just looks like an accident waiting to happen. I mean, it really does. As much traffic as goes through there, those trucks pulling out and they're grabbing the gears and somebody flies around the corner, and it just, particularly as many trucks as you're talking about. I guess the second concern I have is maybe it's just a question, and that is why can't there be a little bit larger buffer area? I mean, I guess that looking at it from the perspective of if that's all it's going to take to make that issue go away, why? Is there something that's keeping you from being willing to increase that area?
Well, it's just the amount of dirt you'll be taking. On the south side, I mean, it won't matter if it's 50 or 40, because it's going to be flat on top, and even though you have 50 feet, when you cut a slope 15 foot into the ground, you're going to be down away from the whether it's 50 or 100. I don't know what difference it makes. I mean, because you're not going to see once you cut down that slope, that 50 foot's going to be, 15, 20 feet in the air, and you're going to be down here on the level. So
I understand.
I
understand what you're saying, but I guess my question is, if that's one of the issues here, is there something keeping you from saying that you?
It's just the amount of dirt. You get less dirt.
Okay. Yeah, and I understand that part real well. So
I'm a dirt contractor.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Benny.
Thank you.
Who do we have now?
Mr. Lewis, is there anything else in terms of presentation from the applicant appellate?
Kelly has a
Thank you.
Thank you.
please identify yourself, Mr. Kelly, for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mike Kelly. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Arkansas. I've been a licensed professional engineer since 1995. I've served as a county engineer for over 20 years, and I have over 30 years of experience in this industry. I'd like to thank you all for hearing us this evening. Is everyone hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is I have an outline, and I'd like to just kind of go through my outline and just kind of present my exhibits that you all have as I go through my outline, if that's okay with the court. Okay, we're here tonight to present to you our red dirt project. There has been discussion about using Hamstring Road and Riches Road and Harmon Road, and we elected to use Harmon Road. We do not have legal access to Hamstring Road. Riches Road is a gravel road that doesn't have sufficient right-of-way for a public road in Washington County. So in order to improve Riches Road, we would have to do major acquisition and construction in order to bring that road up to current county standards, and the right-of-way acquisition would be probably tenacious as well. We do not have the right to eminent domain as counties do and utility companies do and states do. So therefore, if we ran into one opposition, we could not further the project. I'd like to take a minute to discuss with you the history of our county roads, in particular Harmon Road. Harmon Road, like most of the county roads in this area, was built using horse teams and plows back in the 1800s, long before the automobile revolution. These roads have transformed over the years in alignment and surfacing to what they are today. I refer to these roads as our farm-to-market roads. These roads allowed our farmers and ranchers to get their commerce, their meat and their produce, to the town market. According to staff, this is also a major collector road. A major collector route has a federal highway designation. It means it's a major road with the that is one of the main routes to achieve moving public and commerce through a particular area. These roads are usually subject to federal funding for improvements when available. You saw this document earlier. This is our site plan for the rich red dirt. This first sheet is a title sheet, just kind of showing the outline and the location with the property owners' addresses and names. This section is showing the actual site plan itself. I wanted to point out that we are not creating a new drive, but modifying an existing drive. There's an existing drive leading to a rent house that we are going to use as our main entrance. So we're not adding a new driveway in this section of road. We're modifying one that's already there. Mr. Rich's renters use those roads. One happens to be a disabled veteran. He uses that road every day. I wanted to point out that we laid out where the gate location is, 2 security lights, water service for a wash. This is going to be a 250-foot long by 40 feet by 28 feet asphalt with 8-foot shoulders, paved surface. We have a sediment basin over here. We have a sediment basin over here, and all this hatched area is our 9.3-acre mining site. These are the typical sections we plan to build with the road. The first one shows the 40-foot wide of surfacing, 8-foot shoulder, a 12-foot lane with 10 inches of PC concrete, another 12-foot lane with 10 inches of PC concrete, an 8-foot shoulder, all on a 6-inch aggregate base. From the end of that road, we plan to just create the haul road, which is just going to be a gravel road that's only going to be 20 feet wide. These are not public roads. They're not going to have public designation. We're not opening them up to the right-of-way, to the public. These are private roads. This verbiage over here instructs everything that we plan to do for the project. Drainage. The drainage intensity will not be increased. It will actually be reduced. Since we're going to cut the tops of the hills off and make them flatter, we're going to increase the time of concentration it takes for the runoff to reach the streams that are down below it. Erosion control measures will be established, set up, and designed, and monitored and kept at all times. Entrance to the property will be protected by fencing and gates with proper signage and lighting. Truck entrance signs will be placed along Harmon Road for entrance safety. We can even put LED flashers on those if we need to warn the public you're going to have trucks entering. Operations of the facility will be from 7:30 to 5:30 during the summer months and 8 to 4:30 during the winter months. Facility will be closed for inclement weather. Site visibility. Adequate site visibility will be obtained. A detailed traffic study will be submitted for preliminary LSD. That's your large-scale development process. A geotechnical investigation will be performed and conducted, which will analyze the existing pavement structure on Harmon Road, and it'll throw our additional loading onto it, and then it'll analyze it afterwards. And any improvements that recommendation makes, we would be required and are willing to make those improvements to Harmon Road. Traffic, it's estimated an average of 50 trucks per day will be using this facility. And that won't be instantaneous. It's going to take about a year to develop up to that 50 trucks a day. And 50 trucks a day, that's using the facility. The 100 that I think everyone's coming up with is 50 trucks coming in and 50 trucks coming out. Egress to Harmon Road will be kept and clean at all times. We listed the equipment necessary for the operation. No fuel, chemicals, hazardous materials will be stored on the site. Topsoil will be salvaged in a berm around the perimeter of the knoll removal project for reclamation purposes. Reclamation, applying topsoil and vegetation, will be continuous as removal of the knoll progresses. Absolutely no blasting will be performed under any circumstance. Buffers. A 50-foot buffer will be obtained between the knoll removal site and the property lines to the south and west of the knoll removal site. The entrance road buffer varies from 28 to 35 feet from the north edge of the proposed entrance to the property line. We can't increase that buffer without decreasing site safety, site distance. The further I move that road, if I wanted to get a 150-foot buffer for that driveway going into that development, I would have to move the drive another 100 feet to the south, which gets me 100 foot closer to the curve that has the poor sight distance. So that is why we do not want to adhere to a 100-foot buffer on the road. Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality has a requirement for a 50-foot buffer on the site itself. We're more than happy to adhere to the 50-foot buffer that our ADEQ requires. The property owner to the south is for it. The property owner to the east is made no statements. So all the properties around our actual site removal site are either for it or null. They didn't say one thing or the other. which tells me they're not against it, but they're not for it. A permit will be required and obtained by the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality. We cannot do this project without getting a permit from the ADEQ. Okay, this is a Google Earth. I like to use it to kind of show our project. What I want to point out here is you see this bookmark for Holtzclaw ADQ permit. Benny Holtzclaw has a permit to mine dirt at that location that expired June 30th of 2014. Now it's to go under reclamation. Since the pit's supposed to be closed now, or the permit expired, so now it's time to reclaim that portion right there. However, we didn't take anything out of it, so therefore there's nothing to reclaim at that location. I'd like to point out where our project is. Those two marks right there. This is our project, and this is the boundary of our project, this knoll right here. I'd like to point out a University of Hazardous Waste site right here to our west. I'd like to point out another dirt pit that is located in the area. This is Highway 16. There's another dirt pit sitting right down here. There's a rock quarry sitting right up here. There's another dirt pit right there. There's another dirt pit right there. So you can see we're in between dirt pits, hazardous waste sites, rock quarries. What I did at the P&Z meeting of November 6th is I came up with a circle of compatibility. What I did is I picked a point in our project closest to the dense population and the objections that we're having from the neighbors. I figured a distance between this point and that point. It's roughly about 1,300 feet. And I drew a circle around that to see who all we were going to affect with our circle of compatibility. This isn't a very good drawing, but you can see it anyway. You can see the Holtzclaw excavating site. You can see the University of Arkansas hazardous waste site. You can see where our project is, and you can see my circle of compatibility. In drawing my circle of compatibility, I crossed 1 property, 2 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties, 5. There were 5 properties that we encompassed in that circle. 2 of those are rent houses owned by Mr. Rich. One of them is the neighbor next to Mr. Rich, who's indecisive whether the project goes or not. One of them is a owner over on the other side of the road that is opposed to the project. And one of them up here is another owner that is opposed to the project. I want to point out that toxic waste site and all the dirt and rock pits in that area. And the reason I wanted to address the compatibility is there were 3 reasons that planning and zoning denied our conditional use permit, and one of those was compatibility. And I'm trying to show you all that we really are compatible with this area. The second issue that they had was there's a high likelihood that this project will be injurious, causing harm, hurt, damage, or distress to the use and enjoyment of the property and the surrounding area. for those properties already permitted and substantially diminish and impair some property values in the surrounding area. First off, I want to point out again, there's a hazardous waste site right here on Harmon Road. I wanted to point out, and on that hazardous waste site, I have an associate, Jeff Canty, who's a PhD with the University of Oklahoma. He's the man I'd use to do my environmental assessments. I had him look into this site, and so he printed me off this information. He gave me a 77-page report from the environmental concerns for not only this project but for all the projects in this area. I wanted to read a section off of his email. He says, Mike, we got the information back from the database search, see attached. Also found documentation from AEDQ, see attached. The site is a closed mixed waste, low-level, radioactive, and hazardous waste disposal site. Closure circa 1999. There is contamination in the groundwater, solvent 1,4-dioxane. Post-closure monitoring appears to be ongoing. Some inspections as late as 2008. So at one point, that was a bad site. I think staff and all of us agree we're not disturbing the groundwater. We're not going to disturb that site. However, it is a negative impact in this community, in this area, that would be disclosed for real estate transactions. Okay, so it's my opinion the toxic waste site serves as a major detriment to the property values in this area, including Mr. Rich's. The scenarios above would have an insignificant short-term impact, the increased truck traffic, if we get the project approved. However, it would render a long-term positive impact because at the end of the mining of the knoll is going to be a flat, grassy plain that would be conducive to residential building or agriculture, whichever is the choice by the property owner at that time if it's not Mr. Rich. The third item that was addressed for denial of our CUP was safety. I've received an email from Ms. Ritchie stating Harmon Road is posted at a speed of 45 miles per hour. This speed limit will stand unless you can prove this is too high of a speed for this section of County Road per AASHTO's, a policy on geometric design on highways and streets, 6th edition, also known as the Green Book. You must consider horizontal and vertical curve alignment and super elevation. Only after you submit all information, findings, etc., as per these standards, will the county consider any differing speed limit designation. And I have a copy of the email, and I'm highlighting right here that statement that was sent to me. Okay, being a county engineer for the past 20 years, it was easy for me to determine Harmon Road from the top of the hill where Mr. Elkins Drive and where the site is, the toxic waste site is. It was easy for me to determine that road from Mr. Elkins Drive all the way down to Weddington Woods Drive would not qualify for 45-mile-per-hour design. The hill is too steep, the curves are too sharp, and I know, I've been doing this for 20 years, folks. I can tell when something is going to meet 45-mile-an-hour design or it's not going to. I mean, just the terrain of it tells me that it's not going to work. It's not going to meet it. So I assisted in a survey. We have a total station, a robotic data collector. We collected some points, and we went out and we surveyed approximately 1,800 foot of Harmon Road. I submitted my results to planning personnel. At the November 6th meeting, P&Z questioned my findings, and they used outdated versions of the Green Book. I was told to use the 6th edition. They used the 4th and the 5th editions to check my work. There's different information in those editions. When one is outdated, it should be discarded and the others should be used. You should always use your latest edition to verify engineering concepts. Mr. Grote then wrote a letter stating he had different findings, but he even stated that the velocities interpreted were less than 45 miles per hour. In my opinion, Mr. Grote did not properly interpret the information then and with his current findings because he stated the curve we surveyed had 8% super elevation, which you will be able to see from the cross sections I present in a minute that it doesn't. That doesn't even address the fact that outdated data was used to compare my findings. On January 20th, 2015, I mailed a set of stamped as-built plans for this section of Harmon Road to the Honorable Judge Edwards with my velocity findings. As a professional engineer, I took an oath to protect the health and the safety of the public. When I discovered the horizontal curve to the south of the drive of our project, along with the vertical curves, do not meet 45 miles per hour per 6th edition AASHTO Green Book, I felt compelled to send a set of as-built plans to the judge and to the county superintendent for consideration for immediate and future safety improvements. The horizontal curve only meets 15 miles per hour, folks. And one of the vertical curves near our entrance only meets 20 miles per hour. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, this section of Harmon Road does not meet 45 mile per hour design. And I have affixed my seal, my signature, and my license to that fact. Now I'd like to address the intersection sight distance. At this point, the information they provided is moot since this section of road does not meet 45 miles per hour. However, I need to point out deficiencies in the information they are providing, stemming from their research of Chapter 9 of the 6th edition Green Book. Okay, these are the plans that I submitted to Judge Edwards, Your Honor. And I wanted to point out that all the way up here, just past 10, is where the sharp curve is at the top of the hill. This is all a downgrade. It's at 11% through here. It gets down to 17% grade. That's a very steep grade. It has a horizontal curve along here that only meets 20 miles per hour because of the lack of super elevation in it. There's a horizontal curve here that only meets 15 miles per hour because of the lack of the super elevation that's in that curve. And then there's a straightaway through here with vertical curves, though. So then we have to analyze both the horizontal and the vertical side of plans whenever we're doing a study. This vertical curve up here only meets 35 miles per hour. This vertical curve down here only meets 20 miles per hour. And the vertical curve right in here where our entrance is, these lines are where our entrances are, only meets 35 miles per hour. So this 1,800-foot section of road does not meet 45 miles per hour. Now I want to address their findings on Chapter 9 of the Green Book. Oh, first I want to go back and show you these cross sections. I'm sorry. Cross sections. These are the profile of the road. If you were to stand up in this area right along here and sink down into the earth facing the curve, where the sharp curve is, we generated cross sections. Okay, cross sections are going to show how much super elevation each lane of that curve holds. Okay? They claim that this curve has 8% super throughout the whole curve. That's 8%. Okay. So I want to start in here at about, I just want to analyze this from station 16 plus naught to 18 plus naught. And that's a 200-foot section. I took cross sections every 25 feet to come up with these cross sections. At 16 plus naught, the northbound lane has 10% super. That's more than 8%. I agree with that. However, the southbound lane only has 2.9% super, much less than 8% super. You can't say that road has 8% super when one of the lanes does not have 8% super. Both lanes have to be continuous, 8% super all the way across. 16 plus 25. I'll blow this up so we can see it a little better. The northbound has 8.58% super, but the southbound only has 1.75% super, less than 8%. 16 plus 50. Northbound has 8%, 8.73. The southbound only has 2.21. Anyway, you get my idea. That curve, the northbound lane has 8% super. The southbound lane does not have 8% super. Now I want to address the Chapter 9 intersection site design data. The Green Book, Chapter 9, starts out intersections. Let's read this. An intersection is defined as a general area where two or more highways join or cross, including the roadway and roadside facilities for traffic movements within the area. Each highway radiating from an intersection is and forming part of it is an intersection leg. That's the description of an intersection. We're not building a state highway. We're not building a county highway. We're not even building a county road. We're building a driveway. And we're not even building it. We're modifying an existing driveway. which I'm not sure, I should have asked, but I don't know what sight distance is on existing driveways, if we have to adhere to the same thing or not. But that would be a question I'll have in the future if this project goes forth. Another instance I wanted to point out with their time gap on their truck instances is this intersection control. Okay, it says the recommended dimensions and the sight triangles vary for type of traffic control used at an intersection because different types of controls impose different legal constraints on drivers and therefore result in different driver behavior. Procedures to determine sight distances at intersections are presented below according to different types of traffic control as follows. Case A, intersections with no control. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our intersection. We will not have control on this intersection. It will not be mandated to have stop signs, yield signs, or anything, or set traffic signals. It is a private drive, it's an existing private drive wanting to be modified to a commercial drive for our use. They held us to intersections with stop control on a minor road. We will not have a stop control on this minor road. It's not a minor road. It is a driveway. So therefore, I feel like they have misinterpreted the Green Book in both of these instances with their increased site design from 500 feet to the 628 feet that they changed on us at the last meeting. I pointed these things, let me see, hang on. Okay, I wanted to address also the comments from the neighbors. A majority of the comments from the neighbors address safety along Harmon Road. I think there were 30 out of 54 of the comments had something about safety on them. Well, that tells me we have a current safety problem on Harmon Road, folks. At our last meeting, I made suggestions to staff to correct this. You could erect a stop sign at Weddington Woods Drive. Weddington Woods Drive does not have current sight distance. It is as short on their sight distance as we are short on our sight distance to the south. Therefore, if we want to protect the safety of Weddington Woods people, let's put a stop sign there and stop the traffic. That would solve
Mr.
all
Kelly,
kinds of safety.
with due respect to you, we're not talking about a stop sign on Weddington Woods. We're talking about your proposed drive. I ask you, please, to keep your comments to that.
To ourselves? Well, I just wanted to point out that I made suggestions at that last meeting, and I'll leave it at that. So a majority of the comments came from safety, and like I said, I made suggestions to remedy some of the safety hazards that are in that section right now. And there are currently safety problems in that area, and the addition of our drive would also add to that. I don't know that it would add to it, but there's already safety conditions there, and if we don't get our sight distance or get some kind of variance for that, then, or make some kind of warnings, like the county can put a 25-mile-an-hour advisory sign for that sharp curve on their 45-mile-per-hour posted highway. We can put trucks entering signs on that same. We can remedy our situation the same way they remedied theirs, is what I'm going to try and get across. Okay, I'd like to just recap what I just talked about here. First, you remember our circle of compatibility. You remember Mr. Holtzclaw's permit that he has in effect that just retired. I feel that we have provided sufficient reasoning for compatibility. With an industrial toxic waste site to the west and the industrial rock quarrying and stuff and other dirt pits to the east, I feel like that Mr. Rich's property is right in the middle of that and is very compatible with those types of situations. I disagree with the staff's findings on the development having substantially diminished effect on the property values. Again, the toxic waste site, in my opinion, has accomplished that for all of the residents along this project. Third, we want to be treated fairly. We want to use the major collector, Harmon Road, major collector used for commerce to get goods and services to the cities. Our drive has as much sight distance to the south as Weddington Woods Drive has to the north. We will follow the rules that everyone else has to follow. As outlined in the 6th edition Green Book, I have proved that the section of Harmon Road adjacent to our project does not meet 45-mile-per-hour design, and I have put my sign and seal to that effect. Staff appears to be more focused to the sight distance to the south. Folks, I'm more worried about the sight distance to the north. You're going to have higher velocity traffic approaching this site from the north. To me, the sight distance to the north is much more critical than the sight distance to the south. The topography of everything to the south, the curve, the hill, and everything is already going to slow the people down coming from the south going north. So therefore, I feel like a bigger emphasis on the sight distance should be placed to the north, not to the south. A variance with safety improvement recommendations for sight distance was not even considered by the staff. And I want to point out, we have overcome all criteria found in the ordinance and have provided both reasoning and documentation for an approved CUP recommendation. I'll entertain questions.
Go ahead, Stan.
Didn't catch where you were from on your address. And
My address is
just where you were county engineer at. What county?
Cherokee, Adair, Sequoia, Okmulgee, Wagner counties in eastern Oklahoma.
Okay, I just didn't catch that part. I think the question might be for you. It might be for Benny. I'll say right off the top, I'm a believer in property rights. I believe in persons' property rights. I really do. I do want to ask this question, though. How long does it take with a stop dump truck loaded with red dirt to go 30 feet?
30 feet?
That's how far it would be to go across the highway and turn, would it not?
That highway is only about 20 feet wide.
Okay. So then to go 10 feet down the road, how long would it take? Benny might know this better, or one of the drivers.
Yeah, I don't.
But how long would it take, you think?
I'd have to defer to Benny.
From a standstill, you've got the truck standing still. You start. How long does it take to get out on the highway and move out of the way? I'm thinking it's.
When you say go 30 foot, and when you say to get out of the way, between 5 seconds, 10 seconds.
Okay.
I can go 30 foot in just 5 or 10 seconds.
Okay. I'll accept that. 5 seconds. Okay. And I guess I'll just make my point on what I'm experiencing, or what I experienced and what I feel like. I think you should be able to mine your gravel. But teenagers, you have a teenager first.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, can yours read speed signs? Mine cannot. None of my kids could read a speed sign. And I'm just about as bad as they are. I went out there to see the site, and I was standing there and I was counting how long it took to see the car come from, as you said, from the north. And I decided I'd stayed long enough, and I started to walk across. And there was no offense, folks, there's a young man that came down through there with a black pickup with a spoiler up on top of his hood. And I had to jump back because it took him count of four, because I saw him, and I jumped back out of the way. But it took to the count of four for him to go from where I could see him until he was at that spot. Now, if you got a dump truck pulling out, agreed. It takes 4 or 5 to 10 seconds to get out of the way or get down. You'd be legal. Your bumper would be to his front. He would be wrong in running into the back of you. But, he'd be dead wrong if he ran into the side of you on your gas tank. And so that's why I asked the question about how long it takes to get out on the road and out of the way. Thank you.
Ann.
We have this. Well, get this. We've got the red dirt pit. Now, the old red dirt pit that's on this property, did it exit on Hamstring Road?
Yes, ma'am.
Did it have to go through another mining property to get to Hamstring Road?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and
It was
that's your objection?
It was a different owner of the pit, is my understanding. It was a different owner of the pit. That was the guy that went bankrupt or whatever had that pit, and so when he went bankrupt, we lost that easement.
Okay. Well, I think you're looking at the easy way out, and the easy way, the most inexpensive way to get your dirt out of there. And I think that it's too dangerous to come out on Harmon Road. I'm also for property rights, but when we have to put the safety of the general public first, and I'm hopefully you can find another way out, because I don't think Harmon Road is the best way out. Thank you.
Rick?
I used to drive Harmon Road north all the way to 412, going to work over in Tawnytown. And after not too long, I decided that was not a safe place to go. The speed limits are not necessarily followed by most driving that road. I also had incidences of people passing me, and it's a double yellow almost all the way from Highway 16 to 412. Reducing the speed limit to the numbers that you're saying would technically make it possible to do what you want to do as an entrance and exits there. What people are going to do is a whole different thing. They're not going to slow down, because they haven't slowed down. I moved my route down to Double Springs Road. It was better, but not much. I, too, agree that everybody has a right to use their property the way they want to, but when it gets in the way of personal safety, I have to draw a line there. The route out to Rich's Road on Highway 16, I don't know the visibility, but I've looked from that point. You've got a big direction, both directions. You've got a long distance there to do it, and most of these trucks are going to be heading east into the development zone. Some will go west, but those that are oncoming traffic to you that would be coming from the west is going to be coming up a slight incline. They'd tend to go slower. To speak to your concern over northbound traffic, or the traffic coming from the north being more concerning to you, the folks coming down that hill are not slowing down. They come around the curve and they come on down. When they get to the point that they've kind of come out of the curve, they let off the brake. They're going 50, 55 miles an hour down at the bottom of that. I really would hate to see somebody lose their life on that because we put an entrance at that location. And it just needs to be, that aspect of it really needs to be rethought. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Butch, Judge.
Butch.
I also have a concern with the sight distances, and it probably wouldn't make any difference which one of those engineering books that you use. I go down there. I mean, I've been down there and I've driven it, and I'd like to see Mr. Holtzclaw get his permit to mine his red dirt. I just wish that he'd try to come, and I appreciate that you're being very concerned about the welfare of the people on Rich's Road. You're being very considerate, and I understand that, and I believe that you're doing everything you can to get along with all the people around you, and I know we're running out of a place to get the materials. And you pointed out other safety issues on that road that don't even pertain to your development, which to me just makes it worse. It's just, there are safety issues there, and the people that use that road, that's just a part of a ribbon of country road that's all paved that runs all the way from Tawnytown to Farmington. And I don't believe the dump truck drivers, I don't have a safety issue with them. But I think you've already heard it said. Those trucks coming out of there and doing what they're supposed to do, when some kid comes up behind them that's late for work or late for school, and it's a double yellow line, they're going to come around that old slow truck, and that's not the truck driver's fault. And I'll make some enemies by saying
Butch, get
this.
closer to your mic.
I'd approve if you came back with a request to come out Rich's Road. It's a safer way to come. It's maybe not quite wide enough, but you can drive it slow. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the court, not to belabor this, but y'all are going to get a chance to deliberate and express exactly these kinds of opinions as much as you want to. When we come to that point in the agenda, we kind of jumped a little bit ahead of that. The opponents have not had an opportunity to speak yet. But if you've got specific questions for Mr. Kelly, I would suggest to you that that's the appropriate use of this time.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you all.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, Judge, now we've been at it for 2.5 hours. I wonder if the court would and the folks in the room would like a brief break.
No. Is everyone okay?
They can do whatever they want to. I'm talking about mostly the horseshoe.
Y'all want to go on?
I think we're losing people. So.
Yeah.
The next item is remarks by the opponents of the project. And if there is a spokesperson, I would maybe invite that person to come to the hot seat first. I'm sorry, the middle. Coach?
Question.
Yes, Butch.
I have a request. Whenever the public comment speaker's finished, I'd like you to ask for a show of hands of the people in the audience who are in agreement with the comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Identify yourself, Mr. Johnson. And
My name is Dick Johnson. I live at 13650 Pin Oak Road, within a half mile of this property. And first I want to say how much I appreciate the diligence that all of you have put into this question. And you have, your statements and questions have robbed, I think, most everyone of anything they would have to say. I had a whole bunch of things I have to say. You've said everything except for, I want to make two brief points. One point is basically that I'm not an engineer, but I've lived at that same spot for 40 years, and I've driven that road every day for 40 years. I've seen all sorts of stuff. Signage has been pointed out is not going to do anything. We all know it's against the law to litter, but just take a turn on that road. As soon as someone leaves Highway 16, whatever's in the car goes out the window. And that is just the truth. And but we've all talked about
that. You've talked about the safety issue, which is the number one issue. But the one point I want to make is the attorney made a statement that we were here because we not in our backyard type statement. And I'd like to point out something about that. 90% of the people here tonight have no objection to Mark Rich mining his land. We don't have that objection. Our concern is the safety of our family and our children, period. That's our concern. That's why I'm here tonight. You've talked about that. That is your point of interest. The second thing is this. Harmon Road, if you'll look at these maps, Highway 16 bounds this industrial area on one side. Harmon Road bounds this industrial area on another side. We have done our part quietly to be good neighbors to Washington County. We do have a quarry. We have multiple dirt pits. We have a hazardous waste dump. We received 55% of the effluent flow of the Fayetteville sewage before the new plant was built. We're good citizens of Washington County. We don't complain about stuff. We just want our people safe, and I appreciate all of your consideration tonight. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
In accordance with Mr. Pollen's request, if you'd hold your hands up so he can see who agrees with Mr. Johnson's comments.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Butch.
Anybody else want to come forward?
Does anyone else want to speak? Yes, sir. Come forward and identify yourself.
Hello. My name is Walter Ward. I live at 16365 Hamstring Road, which is just kind of to the north of the site. I've got a little bit different experience. I'm a business owner, and I really don't want to stop him from digging his dirt either. But I have had a lot of experience over the years with the red dirt farms and so forth. One of the things that nobody's even mentioned, and it's true, they've talked about putting a spray kit over there to wash down the trucks before they start on the road. But I've driven up and down the other road, the Hamstring Creek exit, for years, and on that road they are very good about having to bring in a brush to brush off the red dirt and the rocks and so forth that fall on it. That road is a very minor incline. It doesn't take much for the trucks to get out, but they still lose a lot of dirt and they still lose a lot of rocks. I have blown tires because I was following a truck and one of the rocks fell off in front of me, and I ran over it and I blew a tire on that road. Now, the other thing that happens is that they track red dirt out onto the road, is more so in the past than now. And no matter how good they are, and I agree that they'll try to keep it clean. So does Rogers Quarry Group. They've done a very good job of trying to keep it clean. But that hill is going to have red mud clay on it. Red mud clay in rain is exceedingly slick. And one of the things that I drive that hill all the time, you come up to that hill, you kind of slow down to get around the corner, but right there when you get to the end, you start speeding up so that you can get out. If you come around that corner and you've got a bunch of red dirt on the highway, in between the times, even if they agreed to clean the highway, you're going to hit that red dirt and you're going to slip off in the ditch. Red dirt is extremely slick, and there's rocks that fall off. We're talking about a major incline. These dump trucks are supposed to have tarps over them, but I have driven out on the other side for years. I know about half of them do it. The other half don't. So we're going to end up with rocks and red dirt onto the hill, which is a major issue. The other thing that I would like to mention is that the quarry over there, the size of the properties around the quarry and that part of the red dirt is larger. It's like 10 acres or so. We're talking about a quarry that's going to be very near a major housing development. If you looked at the maps, you see all these streets and stuff running off there where the housing development is just across the road that comes into that. That's a lot more people affected than is what from the quarry on the other side. And I know from experience that
That
when
was your signal. Your time was up, sir. But
can I have just one quick
that's
thing?
up to
Just
the
one.
judge.
One more second, yeah.
Basically, I know the noise of a quarry. The red dirt farms that are now being closed are right up the hill. Basically, those red dirt farms, they sound like you've got tank battles going on up there with the treads, and then you've got trucks backing up. And I'm equally as far from that one as I am from this one.
Thank you, sir.
Folks who agree with his comments, not to cut you off from clapping.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to speak? Come forward. How much time do you have?
3 minutes.
You have 3 minutes. Identify yourself, please.
Okay. My name is Sherry Main, and I live on the end of Riches Road, parcel as she had on her map, number 48. And I also own 2 other parcels on Riches Road, which my son and daughter and my grandkids live there. I'm not opposing the red dirt pit. It is adjacent to my property. Mark Rich is my neighbor. Mark and Benny have assured me that the land will be reclaimed and the operation will not be long-term, over 6 years. There will not be any additional land added to the original 10 acres to be mined. There's 21 families that live on Riches Road. Most have children and they play along the road because the houses sit very close to the road. We had this same issue in 2002 when Gary Combs, before John David Lindsay, bought the Stevens Red Dirt Pit. Riches Road is narrow, and the houses along the road are very close to the road itself. The road is not wide enough for 2 trucks to pass. The county only has a 30-foot right-of-way easement for Riches Road. This is not adequate width for vehicles to pass with dump trucks. Using Riches Road would affect houses sitting very close to the road and safety of children playing. Using Harmon Road would not affect but maybe 3 homes if turning left from the pit site onto Harmon Road. These homes don't sit close to Harmon Road. The main issue that I am hearing from the folks in Whittington Woods and along Harmon Road are the safety concerns with the road and the inconvenience of following dump trucks and dump trucks entering and exiting the pit onto Harmon. Harmon Road is a main artery road for Highway 16 and 412. The hill on Harmon Road, south of the pit entry-exit area, has always been a problem with cars traveling too fast. If a slower speed limit is posted and lighted flashing signs saying trucks turning, this would handle the safety issue. Regarding, again, the safety of driving on Harmon Road, I think people should be held accountable for themselves and obey the law. Speed limits are posted for a reason. Driving on Highway 16 West, Whittington, is dangerous, and dump trucks are traveling that road daily. The curve on Whittington and Hamstring is very dangerous. We are aware of it, and we slow down, and we are aware of trucks entering and exiting there. Again, people should be accountable, slow down, and obey the speed limits. This would take care of the safety issue. And regarding the bond and reclamation, my property was reclaimed by ADEQ. I now have a smooth sloped, nice area. It's fenced, seeded, and returned to agricultural use, and I now have cattle on the property. And I am right next to Mark Ridge. I have the Rogers Group quarry right to the east of me, and they blast behind me.
Ms. Main, your time is up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
John?
Tell me again your name. I'm sorry. Miss
Sherry Main.
Sherry Main.
Were you speaking for this? Were you speaking for or against this?
I'm not opposed to the Red Dirt Pit.
Okay, thank you
I
very much.
am opposed to using Riches Road.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else?
And just for purposes, we'd like, this time is reserved for the folks who oppose the CUP as applied for. In other words, with the collector road going on to Harmon. So if that's what you intend to speak against.
Yes. Identify yourself, please.
All right. I'm Jim Boyd, and I've been a county resident for 40 years, and I have raised my kids here, and I'm the 4th property to the north of this proposed area. There's a creek that runs through there. I think that's a concern. The safety concerns of the highway have been touched on by lots of people. I have 2 teenage driving people in my family, and so needless to say, the thought of those colliding with a dump truck is a bad thought. So just making some other notes from tonight and listening to everybody, and I'm hoping that y'all will be able to reach a conclusion tonight. There's a lot of folks, my neighbors, that have taken their time out to come and be here and hopefully help you, because it's a big decision you'll have. But I think you made the right decision the first time, and I hope you'll stick with that and stay with that. And if you have questions, I'm certainly available. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
In accordance with Mr. Pond's request, would y'all who agree with Mr. Boyd's comments hold up your hands? Thank you.
Anyone else? Are you speaking against it? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Come and identify yourself, sir.
My name is Bill Robertson, and I live in Weddington Woods, and I am probably the closest house to the entrance to the Harmon Road. I have a view of where they're going to mine. I will actually look down on the pit because my elevation is higher, so I have an objection to the pit itself. The safety issue, that's primary. We all know that people don't drive like they should, but I actually have a view of that hill. And I'm the one, besides Miss Ritchie, that calls 911 every time somebody goes off of it already. They fly down that hill, guys, and they're going to be flying up that hill coming from the north as well. 50 trucks don't run just one load a day. These guys are running, I don't know how many loads they'll run a day, but you're talking hundreds of trucks coming in and out of there. And we do have a stop sign at the entrance of Weddington Woods onto Harmon Road. But this issue of having sight distance, there is no way, guys, that these people are going to be able to slow down in time. I'm a certified appraiser, have been for 35 years with one of the local lending institutions. And yes, I'm sure that there has been some devaluation in that area from the radioactive pit up there, but that devaluation occurred years ago. When I bought several lots and properties in Weddington Woods, was never disclosed about that pit. People will know we have a safety issue at the bottom of that hill. They will know we have a red dirt pit across the hill, and it will devalue the property values. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The folks who agree with Mr. Robertson.
Yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself.
Sherry Williams, and I live at 13531 Dogwood Drive. I bought my house in 2004 and was not disclosed of the problem at the top of the hill. But I have an ex-husband who actually worked that excavation, and my house sold for $244,500 to me, and so there was no devaluation because of it. And I just want to point out that I really believe that the safety issue and the devaluation of home is my concern. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Show of hands. Okay. Identify yourself, please.
My name is Janice Ward, and I live about a half-mile north of the quarry site. I really wasn't going to take the time to talk to you all because so many of these issues have already been addressed. But there's been so much talk about people driving too fast on Harmon Road and how that creates the safety issue and that people need to be held accountable for how they're driving. My concern, even more than teenagers who drive irresponsibly, are the school buses from 2 school districts that go up and down Harmon Road. School buses are a lot like a truck. They don't stop as fast. They're in a hurry to get the kids to school, especially when children are slow about getting on the bus. So they make up time where they can. And if they're driving even the speed limit and that truck is really slow pulling out in front of them, they may not be able to stop in time. And that's the thing that really concerns me that nobody's talked about, is we're not talking about one potential lost life from an irresponsible teenager or an irresponsible senior who's driving too fast for the road conditions. And yes, I'm guilty of that. We're talking about the potential loss of a lot of children's lives from school buses driving even responsibly. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Folks who want to agree with Ms. Ward.
Anyone else? Thank you, folks.
Next is agenda item 6, and Eva, you're listed as the sponsor. Do you want me to read that?
Yes, if you would read 6.1. And so the members of the court understand I'm the sponsor because I'm the new chair of the County Services Committee, so planning matters originate from there. That's why I'm listed.
Item 6.1, an ordinance ratifying a conditional use permit denied by the Planning and Zoning Board. Whereas the
Wait,
planning...
Steve, they're stopping you over there.
Sorry.
I think there was an item for anybody in support.
They both spoke back and forth. Did they not?
Okay,
Yeah.
we didn't have anybody else in support.
We didn't ever ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I skipped a bullet. And I apologize for that. Supporters of the project. That's right.
Okay.
Item 6.1.
Thank you.
And this would be an appropriate time for that, Judge.
Huh?
This would be an appropriate
Yes,
time.
well, go ahead, please.
I just heard a couple of comments I wanted to just kind of make a rebuttal on. Bill Robertson, who says he lives in Weddington Woods and has a view of the red dirt pit from his house, and he opposes the cut for that reason, plus the safety issues and other things. I have the quarry, Rogers Group Quarry, is right behind my house, and I do hear the blasting. I can sit on my deck, but I do not hear dump trucks, tailgates banging. When they blast, I'm called, and I know when they're going to blast. So that I don't think, I mean, that may be a concern to him, but I don't think that's gets into the safety and the devaluation of the property issue. Sherry Williams lives in Weddington Woods, and she said safety and devaluation of homes. I don't see a devaluation in homes. If there were, mine would be a great devaluation because I have a rock quarry right in my backyard, but my home is not devaluated. Janice Ward commented on the school buses stopping on Harmon. I don't think there's any school buses. There may be one or two stops because there's only 3 homes from where the entry exit is for the pit to Highway 16. So I can't believe there's more than maybe one school bus stop that the trucks would be encountering. On Riches Road, we have a school bus that comes down the road, 2 school buses, a narrow road that picks up small children. And it would be very much more dangerous for a dump truck to be passing a school bus with children loading and getting on and off the buses. On Harmon, I don't think that would be the case because there's no bus stops. The bus doesn't stop between the entry exit point and Highway 16. So I just wanted to make those couple of
Thank you, ma'am.
Now 6.
Anybody else in favor?
I have a possible support. I have a question.
Now, wait a what?
My name is Terry Davis.
We're in the in favor part. That's the bullet I skipped, members of the court, and I apologize for that. But if this member of the public is coming to speak in favor of the project,
I said possible because I have a question for these people. My name is Terry Davis Beaupre. I live at 16035 Beechnut Lane. That's in Weddington Woods. There was a gentleman up here earlier that talked about clay, which is what you guys are talking about when you're talking about red dirt. It's clay, and it's slick when it's wet. And they were talking about doing tire washes, which is all fine. But when I'm looking at this profile going up this hill, and they're saying it's a 17-degree grade, 90 degrees is perpendicular, 45 is half of that. That's about a 35 or a 45-degree angle. And I followed a dump truck into town today on my way into Fayetteville that was hauling red dirt down 16. And it had this big pile of dirt on top of it. And I passed the truck when I got to the 4-lane part, and it was almost piled all the way to the end of the tailgate. And I don't know how big the tailgates are. Are they like 4 foot, 5 foot? It was at least half the height of the tailgate. And I think that Arkansas state statutes does not require tarping of trucks that haul dirt. It's only rock, sand, and gravel. So if they have a red dirt farm, they're not required legally to tarp these trucks. And as heavy as dirt is, as heavy as clay is, on a 35 to a 45-degree angle, even if you put a little thin tarp on that thing, it's not going to hold dirt coming off of that.
First off,
It's not going to hold dirt. You can see through those tarps. So my question is, if those trucks start going up that hill and they are going up a 35-degree incline to 45, they have to catch a lower gear. That stuff is going to shift. And like this other gentleman said, there's going to be clay on the road surface. There will be. Maybe it's just a cup, but when you have 50 trucks a day and you got 50 cups, and then day after day after day that stuff builds up on the road, once it gets onto the highway, it's not these people's responsibility. They have no, you were talking about liability earlier, they have no liability involved in that whatsoever. It's like when a gravel truck goes down the road and you catch, like later on, you catch a rock or somebody throws a rock in your windshield, you turn it on your insurance because it's a road hazard. That's what this would be considered, a road hazard. So if the owners of this property would sign some type of affidavit that said that they would be responsible for any accident on that hill as a result of the buildup of the red clay, then I would support them. But I don't think their attorney is going to advise them to do that. Mr. Ruiz?
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else who definitely wants to speak in favor of the project?
I had people, but I thought we were going.
Please identify yourself, sir.
I'm Mark Rich, and I was born in Washington Regional, so I've been here 52 years. I don't have much to say. There was less houses. When I first bought onto my family farm, there was a 20-foot driveway easement. It was not wide enough, so I didn't do a realtor or anything. When I bought the home on Harmon Road, Tammy and Kendall, the couple that owned it, told me how much they wanted, and I purchased it so that I would have another way out. Through the Planning Commission, and I posted on Facebook, who's a good commercial realtor, and I got all kinds of people hitting. And I've had some people come out to the farm trying to get me to list it, and when they went down to view my rent house, they asked me what the chain link fence thing was up on the hill, and I told them and showed them the documentation, and they said that they would have to put a complete disclosure on any home that they sold within a half mile to a mile of that site. And I said, well, how much is my rent house worth? or my home. And they said, well, we can't put a price, what it's going to mean to somebody. I don't want to hurt these people's property value. I don't want to damage their lifestyle in any way. Through somebody else going into bankruptcy and stuff, I don't have any way out to go out the other way. Benny Hoslaw, the reason is because he's been here in the business 30 years. The money that will be made will be Washington County tax money. The realtors that have came out said that the only people that would be interested in my farm would be mining companies, and they would be more interested in the state-grade limestone that's underneath the red dirt.
Mr. Rich, I have to tell you that your time has expired, your 3 minutes, and I know you're the owner. If folks on the court want to let you continue or have questions for you, this would...
Anybody got any questions?
And that's fine. I thought you would say that, but... The
Go
court
ahead.
wants you to continue, Mr.
Go
Rich.
ahead, Mark.
So, over the period of time, I lived in Elton and Lucille Rich. My parents have lived on that farm for years. They're with the radioactive place and a quarry on the other side. Everybody but y'all think it's commercial. The bank makes me pay a commercial loan. The taxes are commercial. As far as going to the south up that hill, everybody, including myself, is worried about the safety of the people of the neighborhood. Mr. Elkins, the owner, and Stella, his wife, and I have talked numerous times. He had said at one time that I would clear it. He's been put in the middle, kind of, as far as it. But I feel like that if it was a safety issue, that all the neighbors would already want it cleaned up right now, so there wouldn't be any site problem. I feel like the speed limit, I drive a Toyota 4Runner. I have tried to go around that curve with the speedometer or with cruise control at 45 and ran off the side of the road. And it corners very well for an SUV. At 40 miles an hour, I would challenge any of you members, justices, to go drive that road. And in that first picture of the vegetation, one of those trees is mine, is on my side of the property. But I was told not to cut anything, and I'm trying to do everything that she told me to do. But as Mr. Shrum said, from the counties, they don't have very much right-of-way, but from there over to the electric line is Ozarks Electric. Well, they have a right-of-way. They have a gate there on my property to clean that. Well, I called them. They said at this time they didn't have, basically they said they were going to do it. I called Juliet. She said, you can't do it until this is over with. So they actually have the right to clean that area for the site distance. But I just talked to Mr. Elkins. He had came by my house 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this is really swayed on him and his wife being put in the center. And he said that the people that had stopped and swayed him, I thought they were all old friends, but he said a lot of them he'd never met before. But I understand the pressure that's been put on them. There was a statement said by one of the people here that I had threatened him for the last 2 or 3 years, And in no way have I threatened Mr. Elkins or Mrs. Elkins. Whenever I bought the land adjoining them, he asked me, and I said, I want to clean that knoll off one of these days. And I have never been anything but honest and up front with them. And, you know, as far as the dump trucks, I told Juliet I wanted to be beat with the same stick everybody else was. I drove a dump truck myself. There's a right way and a wrong way. All trucks have to be tarped. It's against the law for a truck not to be tarped. All trucks have to be loaded 6 inches below the boards, even including the tailgate board. I also contacted the state police, and I was just trying to do research on the speed limit. The state police, the corporal, I have his card at Troop L, told me that yes, it is 45 miles an hour, but any car involved in an accident will be given a ticket for driving too fast for conditions. So any vehicle driving over the 25 miles an hour involved in an accident will be wrote a ticket. So basically the state policeman told me that, yeah, it is 45 miles an hour, but if you're driving that fast in that area and something happens, you're going to get a ticket. But, you know, I can understand all these people, you know, I don't want to cause any harm to their lives or any, you know, I agree with one thing, that you should abide by the law. As a single parent, I raised my son by myself. He's a United States Marine. He's been in the Marine Corps 8 years. I raised him since he was 6 years old. To do something wrong, I explained to him you have to own it. You have to admit to it. There may be a lot of things that people have to do to safety. And one thing is, we're thinking safety, we need to clean that hill off and lower the speed limit. At least just down the hill and to the curves. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody got any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Rich?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anybody else in support?
My name is Matt Holtzclaw. Benny's my dad. I've been doing this for about 15 years. This is his livelihood, and this is my livelihood. I understand the concerns about safety. I think they're a little over-exaggerated. Not all of them, but some of them are. And you know, we're not trying to upset people. We're not trying to aggravate people. We're just trying to make a living, and an honest living. You know, every circumstance, every problem, there's a way it can be resolved, you know, where people can meet in the middle. And, you know, to say that somebody isn't going to follow the speed limit coming off Harmon Road so a dump truck can't come out on it, I think that's a little unrealistic. You know, dump trucks are everywhere. That's what hauls the dirt. I mean, I understand people's concern, but I just think it's being a little bit over-exaggerated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holtzclaw. I didn't ask for show of hands for the folks who agreed with the supporters, but I'll do that for Mr. Holtzclaw. His dad says so. The engineer says so. Anybody else in support? All right, Judge, with your okay and the court's okay, I will now proceed to read 6.1.
Go ahead.
Item 6.1 is an ordinance ratifying a conditional use permit denied by the Planning and Zoning Board. Whereas, pardon me, the Planning and Zoning Board denied a conditional use permit on November 5th, 2014 for Rich Red Dirt, and whereas an appeal has been filed concerning such, and Whereas, based on the actions of the Planning and Zoning Board and the facts before the court, now therefore be it ordained by the Quorum Court of Washington County, Arkansas, Article 1, that the conditional use permit for Rich Red Dirt denied by the Planning and Zoning Board is hereby ratified. Depending on what happens tonight, I think I should probably go ahead and read 6.2 also, unless there is some kind of motion to advance 6.1 right now and decide on it. Having said that, if y'all do that, I need to caution you that there needs to be more public comment before you vote. At least we have to open it up for public comment before you vote.
Well, let me ask about the procedural issue. So if we were to leave it on first reading and just advance it to second reading next week, that would not require additional comment.
That's correct.
Okay. And we would vote just to place it on second reading.
You don't even need to vote.
Oh, okay.
You could gavel down on this tonight.
Okay. Well, I know that one of the commenters noted that a lot of people were here, and we've been here for more than 3 hours, and that I think everybody feels, I'm thinking at least those in opposition, it seems, have been here, and nobody's really been denied an opportunity to oppose. But I know, Mr. Holtzclaw, I heard you maybe say that people who were on your side left and didn't get to speak.
There were a couple. I thought you were through with the fours.
Yeah. Would you mind coming to the microphone? I just want to make sure that your comments are recorded for the record.
I just had a couple more. I thought we were through with the fours when you started, and I told him, I said, "You guys, you've been here 2.5 hours. You might as well go ahead and go."
Okay.
So it was just someone from Nabholz and Dean Crowder Construction, but it's okay.
Okay. Well, I sort of have the sense that I've heard enough, and I would be ready to vote tonight. But I don't want to do that and make a motion without some sentiment from the court.
So do you guys want to move it forward and place it on the second reading?
Okay.
Okay.
So then,
I want to see the second reading.
well, then, do you want me to?
Go ahead and make
Okay.
a motion. Yeah.
Well, then,
Sue, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Madam Judge. Is there any extraordinary vote required to either support or reverse a decision of the planning board?
The
Or is it a
substantive vote
simple
only has to
part?
be a majority, but if you're going to move it up, you have to have 2/3 on the two subsequent votes to move it up. and
So
get it on.
only expediting the matter requires
correct.
2/3.
Yes, ma'am.
Which would be 10. Did I do that right?
yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, so, thank you.
Yes, Joel.
I just feel like we've been given some different insights, some different perspectives. I had read through all of this, all the neighbors' comments, everything that I could find on the website, went out and did a site survey myself. But this has certainly triggered some new questions and some new things that I want to research. So I would just like to personally say I would like to have the additional readings so that we have time to follow up with that. Thank you.
I agree with Joel's comment.
So do we want to go ahead and suspend the rules and place it on the second reading and then do the third reading the next week?
Judge,
That
you could also do the next two readings if
The
you
same
wanted
night?
to on the regular quorum court meeting,
Okay.
which is
Well,
the next scheduled.
Okay,
meeting.
then if that's what you want to do, the way we stand, it just moves it forward.
Well, the concern I have with doing that is I'm not sure that that's really what everybody wants to do, but if we advance it to the second reading and then have the third and final reading at our regular quorum court meeting, it means that all these people are going to have to come back and sit through our quorum court meeting and not a special meeting.
Yeah, that's
so I think if we want to hear more, then I think we need to leave it on first reading. And then next week when it's on second reading, it just needs to say on second reading, and then we need to leave the third reading so that these people don't have to come back for our regular quorum court meeting. That's my sense, because our meetings do tend to go a little long, and I think we're going to have a healthy agenda next week. So that's my concern. I could move to advance it to second reading and third reading, and we could see if that fails to try to get it done tonight. I'm hearing a lot that folks want to do that, but anyway.
Yes, Sue.
I'm showing my
newness on the court here. Thank you, Judge. When is the court going to actually discuss this ordinance? Do we wait till the last reading, or do we do it in pieces? When do we actually state our positions? And we've heard a lot of discussion here tonight. I think the people would like to hear our sentiments tonight, and I'm certainly prepared to give mine. And I've just, so you'll know, I'm prepared to vote on the issue tonight. We've heard a lot of testimony from people, and I'm happy that Mr. Maxwell has done so much research. But
if I could answer Sue's question, there's nothing that says you can't talk about it tonight, but if you don't advance it, you can't vote on it. And you can express your feelings in this public forum to your fellow quorum court members, but advancing it would be the actual deliberation part of.
I'm just going to ask a question when you're done.
But to vote on it, it must be advanced. There's nothing to stop you from talking about it now.
So if I were to make a motion to advance 6.1 to the second reading and suspend the rules and read by title only, if that passed, it would move to second reading. But if it failed, then it would stay on first reading.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, then that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make a motion to advance 6.1 to the second reading and suspend the rules and read by title only. It's not that long, but.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor to amend rules and move forward, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, it passed.
Okay. Then
Joe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we need to call the roll for that?
We can call roll if we need to. Go ahead. Go ahead. Let's call roll. Yeah, let's call roll.
Okay. Harvey Bowman.
No.
Rick Cochran.
Yes.
Robert Dennis.
This is just for the reading part.
Yes.
Yes.
Lisa Ecke.
Yes.
John Furman.
No.
Ann Harbison.
Yes.
Eva Madison.
Yes.
Sue Madison.
Yes.
Joel Maxwell.
No.
Joe Patterson.
Yes.
Butch Pond.
Yes.
Bill Ussery.
Yes.
Daniel Balls.
Yes.
That's 10.
That's 10.
It passed, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, we can go ahead and take it to a
Can I make
vote
it?
on the final vote.
Well,
we
we
need
have
third
to read
reading.
it again, Judge.
Okay.
He has to read the title, and then,
An ordinance ratifying a conditional use permit denied by the Planning and Zoning Board.
okay, now can I be recognized for the third reading?
Yes.
So now I make a motion that we advance this to the third reading and suspend the rules and read by title only.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Yes, Harvey. Sure.
Are you saying by this, we're voting to approve or disapprove this? What are we saying here?
You're simply advancing if you put it on third reading, you're about to vote on the merits of the ordinance.
Okay.
But what you're voting on right now is the motion that Eva just made and that was seconded to place it on third and final reading by title only.
Okay.
And to suspend the rules in doing so.
Guys, I guess my concern here, we've listened to a lot of information. And I think that we need some time to do further discussion within our group. And I would like to not vote on this proposition tonight at all without we have time to do some more discussion within our group and reflect on some of this information we received. Now, I'd say if we can go ahead and put it on the third reading for next week or the next meeting, that'd be great. But at this point, I think we need some more time. It's already after 8 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, it's after 9 o'clock.
Or is it after that? Holy smokes. We need some time to discuss this within our group and reflect on the information we've been given to make a decision about this.
Joe?
Microphone.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and move it up.
Or
But do we not have the final meeting until 2 weeks from tonight instead of having it on a quorum court night?
Well, if you place it on third reading, you've got to make a decision now. You have to vote on the merits tonight if you put it.
Well, I would make a motion then that we not have the final reading until 2 weeks.
But
There's a
Eva's
motion.
got a motion on the floor with a second, as I recall. Yes?
Yes.
So to accomplish what you're saying, Joe, you have to vote against Eva's motion. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, do me a favor, Steve.
I have a question.
Okay.
Point of information.
John?
So now that we've advanced it once, what Eva was saying was that we have to, if we don't advance it on this reading, then it has to go to the quorum court, and that's when we have to have the
Okay.
meeting. Will you
I'm
clarify
going to have
that?
Steve to explain this.
Okay.
So
You
everyone knows.
don't have, it's on the agenda on the second reading for the regular quorum court meeting a week from tonight.
Next Thursday.
You don't have to, you can take it off the agenda. You can put it on and leave the special meeting that you have, I think, on the 24th,
Yeah.
and leave that for the third reading and the final
I would just
deliberation.
like to not have it on the same night as quorum court.
And y'all can remove it from the agenda. Ask that, it's your ordinance, isn't it, Eva? You could, as a sponsor, just say, I don't want it, if that's what you want.
Okay.
Those who want to research it, that gives them 2 weeks
Well,
from tonight.
can I be recognized again?
Yes, go
Judge?
ahead, Rebecca.
I'll just say that I think in my experience, when we have these things advanced to a second time, we don't hear anything different. We may learn a little bit of additional information on our own, but I would encourage those folks that have questions to take advantage of this opportunity to try to get those done, because we have had a lot of people here since before 6 o'clock. And whether we do it next week or the next week, they're all going to have to come back, and we're probably going to hear all of the same stuff again. And I'm trying to be considerate of all these people that have been sitting here all night, everybody. And I'll.
Okay, I've got, okay, go ahead.
Well, so I was just going to say, think about that. If you've got information that can be obtained tonight, let's get it, because we're not going to hear different information in 2 weeks or 1 week or whenever. But I will say, so you all know, if it doesn't pass to go to third reading and it stays on the second, I will move it to a special meeting so it's not a quorum court night, which means a shorter agenda.
Okay, I'm going to recognize. Okay, Rick, I think you're first.
The thing that, as long as we are honest with our constituents and do pull it from next Thursday's meeting, that is fair to them. My concern is that if you don't have it on the agenda and it's brought back, then they don't know to come. So can we be 100% assured that if we don't go to the third reading, that we will not pursue this ordinance next Thursday?
I don't think Eva just told us she's not going to do that. But
Will you remind us, Carly, when we're set for the third, when we were set for the third, which would have been a special setting?
It's 2 weeks from tonight, I believe.
It'll be on the 24th.
The 24th. I didn't think it's not 2 weeks. Yeah, that's what I've got.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday, yeah.
Okay, now I still got some discussion
So yes.
here. Robert?
All right, thank you.
I will do it. It would be on the 24th then.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want, I know how I want to think. I know how I want to vote, but and I know that we've asked those who are opposed, but I do want to be fair to this group, to them, because they had people get up and leave. Do you have anything more that you want to add, or are you ready to vote? Would be my question, if I'm allowed to ask that question.
You're allowed to, sure.
If they're okay with voting, because they're the ones that had the people leave because of our fault. I just want to be fair to them as well as y'all. Or are you ready for a vote?
I would like to I would like to speak again.
I would entertain that we let him speak again, and then I'd be ready to vote.
Well,
if they're ready.
If you're talking about doing that tonight, you need to amend the agenda. But that's not proper right now because we have a motion on the floor to suspend the rules.
Place on second reading.
And place it on second reading or third reading.
Third reading,
by
yes.
title only.
Then if they had more to say, then I want to vote against it. I just tell you because of that reason. Otherwise, I'd be ready to vote. But I don't want them to feel like that they got shorted. Just to be
Well,
fair.
it's up to y'all.
suspend the
I'm
rules
just here
and
to
let him
chair the
talk.
meeting.
Could we suspend the rules and let him talk?
That's what I'm saying, but you have to, you
have to
could do
vote.
that. You'd have to move to suspend the rules and amend the agenda, but you can't do that now because you unless you withdraw the motion to suspend the rules and put it on title, the title ruling.
Well, then, so moved. I withdraw the motion to place on third reading, and I move that we suspend the rules and allow Mr. Kelly another opportunity to speak.
Do I have a second? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign? Okay, now we're still at the second
Second
reading. Mr. Kelly, do you want to speak tonight? Go right ahead.
Thank you again for this opportunity to speak again to you all. I just wanted to point out that our original sight distance that we were shooting for when we started this project was 500 feet. We were 426 feet without doing any clearing. Even if the county were to clear their right of way, we probably could have obtained the 500 feet. We're just that close to getting that sight distance that we needed. And that's all I want to tell you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Juliet?
If we're rebutting things, staff has some things that we would like to clarify based on some stuff that Mr. Kelly said. If y'all are interested, I mean, obviously that's.
Y'all want to hear Juliet? Are you comfortable with things the way they are? Come forward.
Okay, well, first of all, I mean, there are several things that he said that I probably want Clay to address. I mean, if we're going to talk about engineering issues, I don't know what y'all have learned particularly that's giving you pause. I didn't go into the, we discussed it ahead of time. Myself and Clay and Sean discussed everything that he brought up ahead of time. And we decided not to go into the minutia, basically, of all the engineering ins and outs of how, super elevation and things are determined. While he was taking into consideration both lanes, for instance, when he was calculating his velocities on that road, we were taking into consideration the northbound lane, which did have the higher percentages because that was the lane in question. That was the traffic in question, the traffic that was heading north. There were decisions made by our team and our engineer that we feel like we can completely back. And so I don't know what your specific questions are, but everything that he brought up, we addressed. Yes, I understand that it's not a highway. Okay, he was talking about, well, that's not the appropriate way to look at that. Well, we're looking at the best way that we have to evaluate the safety. He's saying that he is modifying a driveway. It's a residential driveway for one house. They're changing it to a commercial drive. They're making it much bigger than it was, and it's going to have 100 trips a day on it. That basically functions as a road, a minor road, okay? And so that was the best tool that we had to evaluate that. And we look at all these things for safety. So I guess what I'm telling you is we have reasons for everything that we did. And I feel like they're good reasons, they're solid reasons. We spent hours debating it, going out on site, discussing it between one another. And so I don't, it's hard for me to know when it's our place to kind of rebut things. We had our spot to say, but I feel confident that we looked at the things that had the safest outcome in mind, and they were appropriate for the situation at hand. And so if you have questions about that appropriateness, then please ask them. And Clay will give you however little or more detail that you want in regard to detailed engineering. I just don't know what level that you want to go to.
Thank you.
Judge.
Yes. Harvey?
Juliet, I guess one of the questions came up to my mind was he kept referring to the difference in the books you used to make these determinations versus the one he used. Can you give me a response to that?
Yes, everything that you had. That's what I went through. We did use some older editions at the meeting in November. However, how the sight distance is calculated, which is the critical part, did not change from edition to edition. However, to eliminate confusion, all of the calculations that you got on that plan profile sheet from our engineer and that letter, those were all done by the 6th edition. So, I mean, I guess he can argue it, but it's a moot point now. We redid all of it to eliminate that confusion.
Yeah. Well, Juliet, I guess one of the things that I'd hope we could talk about tonight was if we're talking about 100 trucks per day, and that's only 100 trucks on an 8-hour period, that's every 12 trucks per hour, or one truck pulling onto that highway every 5 minutes. And my concern is, number one, they're going to be headed south up that hill with a loaded truck full of clay. And I want to know what's their speed going to be by the time they get to the top of that hill. They're going to basically stop traffic every time a truck pulls out on that road. and head south. And I don't think that's a very positive proposition to deal with. And then the issue about the clay on the road and so forth, it's almost unavoidable to have some material on that highway, and when it's wet, it's slick. And that's going to dramatically increase the potential of problems on that road. And I think the secondary road, even though it may not be a great place to move the trucks, I think it would be far fewer people at risk there, and it would dramatically improve the safety situations involved there. So those are the kind of things I thought we need to talk about as a court before we move this thing on to a vote, unless you're all solidly opposed to it at this point. Thank you.
Rick, you had your hand up, didn't you?
Yes.
Thank
yes,
you.
Thank you, Judge. When we look at the 7 criteria that we're tasked to make a decision on, my feelings on those items, 1 and 2, they have fulfilled. Number 3, I have a little bit of a question about it. I'm concerned that this access road is going to get backed up early in the morning, and the trucks may be queued up out onto Harmon Road. I'm not sure how many are going to be there. That's not anything I'll know. As Harvey mentioned, I have concerns about the red dirt debris that's going to be on Harmon Road. I travel 16 coming in, and there was a period of time when the other quarries were active with red dirt that was slick as ice when it got wet. And Fayetteville did do some things to make them kind of clean up their act, and some of the reduced traffic helped that too. But this is going to be a very busy activity there. That was on a flat stretch where they were tracking the dirt down. I don't know how bad it would be on a hill, but it can't be better. Item 4, the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding area. Although the applicant feels this is a compatible activity in the area, I don't agree with that. There's significant difference in the traffic pattern of trucks that the project is compared to the other site. It's much different. The access road is too close to the neighbors, and the noise from the loaded trucks going up that hill is going to be heard well into the Weddington Woods subdivision. So it really, in my mind, fails on number 4. Number 5 says the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental or endanger public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. You know, this left-hand turn visibility is a problem. Trucks heading up the hill loaded, they're going to back up traffic and create a hazardous situation for other traffic. I don't feel like reducing the speed limit is going to help it, because the people are going to go faster than the speed limit anyway. I have concerns about the activity near the U of A waste site. Although the U of A says it's been cleaned up, they're still prohibited from drilling there. And the U of A didn't really explicitly give us a green light on this. Item 6, the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the surrounding area for purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish or impair property values within the surrounding area. There are only 2 exits from Weddington Woods, only 2. And they either are going to reroute and go the other way out and come out on 16, or they're going to come out on Harmon Road and face that truck traffic every day. Noise, as we know, reduces enjoyment, and those trucks going up the hill will be loud. They're going to be loaded, they're going to be grinding, they're going to be loud. The property values will definitely be reduced. No question about that, and I cannot understand the applicant can say that the values would increase. That was something that made a comment. Number 7, I'm kind of iffy on that, but this fails on several items that we are to consider, and if we're voting right now, I cannot approve the rich red dirt permit. Thank you, Judge.
Anyone else? Yes, go ahead. Let's get
Okay. So now I renew my motion to advance 6.1 onto the third and final reading and suspend the rules and read by title only.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Steve?
There's one, no, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you, Judge, do the ayes have it, ma'am?
Yes, the ayes have it.
Thank you.
But we need a majority. I think they're asking us to.
Well, let's go ahead and call a roll. We do have, that's fine. Call the roll.
Harvey Bowman?
Yes.
Rick Cochran?
Yes.
Robert Dennis?
Yes.
Lisa Ecke?
Yes.
John Furman? Ann Harbison?
Yes.
Tom Lund? Okay, sorry. Eva Madison?
Yes.
Sue Madison?
Yes.
Joel Maxwell?
No.
Joe Patterson?
Yes.
Butch Pond?
Yes.
Bill Ussery?
Yes.
Daniel Balls?
Yes.
11-2.
It did pass. It's okay.
That's, yeah, and now the next item of business on your agenda is for y'all to deliberate, and then we'll open it back up for more public comment if there is more. Judge?
Go ahead.
So I did a lot of studying on this before tonight, and also I received some telephone calls and some letters, and I know that definitely there's a lot of neighbors that oppose this. I've been in neighbors' situations like that, and I think that what I've seen in my experience is that when a property owner wants to do something with their property and you run into opposition from the neighbors, it never works well if you get approval against a ton of opposition. The better way, and I've seen it work, because where there's a will, there's a way. The better way is to do it in some type of compromise fashion. And I know that the Rogers Group has not been cooperative with you, and that's disappointing. But my hope would be that maybe there would be some further opportunities. I don't think that by shutting off the Harmon Road access, it means that you can't find a way. It just may take a little bit more work. But referring to the actual criteria that we must use in considering this, I do feel like staff spent a tremendous amount of time and effort really studying this, restudying this, and restudying it. And this is one of those instances where we are not the experts, and we have to have faith in our staff that they've done the right thing. So we come into this with Ms. Ritchie's recommendation that we follow their lead and deny the CUP. So looking at the elements, I focus usually on 4, 5, and 6. Those are the ones where our determination usually comes down. And I'll say to Mr. Kelly, you were convincing somewhat to me on the compatibility issue, because the circle was meaningful. As Mr. Johnson mentioned, you all have had your share of burdens out there. You have Weddington Woods, which is, I've been out there several times. It's definitely a residential community, but by virtue of being in the county, you're very close to widely varying things from your homes. You have rock quarries, you have red dirt pits. So to some extent, the compatibility issue, I'm wavering on that one. I'm not sure that one is on anybody's side, because I think it's very mixed out there. But the biggest challenge for me is number 5 with the safety. I'm on a residential street. We're near a school. The speed limit is 25 miles per hour. It's not the teenagers that are speeding. It's the moms on their cell phones picking up kids after school and cutting through the neighborhood. And so you can do everything in your power to post a speed limit. You can have sheriff patrols check periodically. You know, we have to listen to our road department and say that 45 is the appropriate speed for this type of collector road. If that's the appropriate speed, then that's the appropriate speed. We can't assume that everybody will obey the speed limit, unfortunately, and that is one of the things that engineers and experts take into consideration when they're evaluating the safety of things. And to me, the sight distance concerns, just having dump trucks moving slowly, carrying heavy loads, they can't move quickly, they can't stop quickly. The school bus is a concern to me. And so I will have to follow planning's lead on this because of my concern about the safety on Harmon Road. Thank you, Judge.
I said it before, but apparently it was an inappropriate time. My only thing is, it's number 5. It's a safety issue. The sight distance is for turning, and it's not just because of what the planning board told me. I've driven out there many times, and you can just see it. Anyway, and like I said, this does not mean that I don't want these folks to have their red dirt, because we're in need of the materials in this county. And I said it before, I think they're bending over backwards to be as considerate as they can. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. My first question is, procedurally, do each one of us need to say what on here? Do we need to go through that?
Bill, I'm glad you brought that up. If you intend to vote to deny the CUP, you need to vote for this ordinance, 6.1, which is saying you're ratifying the decision of the planning board and denying the CUP. And yes, I would appreciate it if you would say under what criteria you are casting your yes vote, as Eva and Butch did, because that lets, if it winds up in court, it lets a court look at the ordinance and your reasons. Thank you.
Okay. And then my other comment is that I feel like there's and the reason I'm voting that I will vote to go along with what the planning people have said, the staff has said. I do feel like there's a big safety issue. But having said that, I certainly hope, along with Eva, that you do find a way to make this happen, and that compromise is out there somewhere. And so, but I'm going to have to vote against this because of the safety issues. That the main thing is the coming out onto the road where it comes out on. It seems like a no-win situation. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Judge. I am in support of our planning board and therefore in support of this ordinance. And part of my reasoning is that I think the applicant has not really shown a spirit of cooperation or compliance or alternative options. Instead, they have just argued with us tonight, especially on the safety concerns. That bothers me. I thought our county staff very thoroughly went through their concerns about sight distances and speed limits and curves and hills, and very carefully documented the issues with safety on that road. And instead, we were presented with engineering details, and I don't feel like this board is the place to hash out engineering details. That should have happened somewhere else. I think the compatibility issue is once again something that is being argued with in their response. Yes, the university had a hazardous waste site there. They have remediated it, and there is nothing any of us can do about that. Washington County can't do anything. If it were in the city of Fayetteville, they couldn't do anything about it because that is University of Arkansas property or state property. They have pointed to the existing mining pits in the area, but almost none of them are active. They've pointed to the reclamation permits that are in place, but none of the reclamation is complete. So really, as far as what's currently happening in the neighborhood, this would be incompatible, highly incompatible. And when you add 50 trucks a day, and that doesn't speak to how many trips a day, that certainly would not be compatible with the current situation in that neighborhood. And the language in their rebuttal to the injury to the surrounding neighborhood was a bit curious, and I had trouble exactly understanding what they were meaning. But I think they were ignoring the fact that the property is not being used for mining or hazardous waste in a sense. So it's and their current reclamation project is not happening. So I think this would be a new injury to the neighborhood for that reason. And the fact that we have one very close neighbor who's not objecting does not imply no position or consent in my book. I mean, this is Arkansas, and it's really hard to go against a neighbor in public, and not many people, especially if you're longtime neighbors, would do that. So I would like to say how much I agree with J.P. Dennis, that I'm a strong believer in property rights. My family, from grandfather on down, what little money we've ever had has only been in real estate, primarily undeveloped, but some also developed. I don't think my grandfather knew what the stock market was. And our Constitution in Arkansas speaks very strongly of the right of property. So there are strong property rights in Arkansas, and I believe in those. But I'm also a very strong believer in neighborhoods, in safety, and in compatibility issues, and For those reasons, I have to agree with our planning board. Thank you.
My position is to support planning for, I think, the clearest. There are several questions that I still have, and I'm disappointed that you're not, if this fails, if you're not able to mine, I'm disappointed with that. I feel like you should be able to use that property. However, I think that the criteria number 5 and the safety and opening up a whole new road to 100 loads of, 100 trips a day, which really does work out about 5 minutes, every 5 minutes, which is really going to change the whole nature of that side of the neighborhood. And so it's a real concern to me. And unfortunately, for that reason, I'm going to be supporting planning tonight and deny the CUP.
Just tell them when we vote what we're voting for, 4, 5, or 6.
Lisa.
I want to acknowledge the Miss Ritchie and the Osmonds who sent me letters and phone calls that I've received. I heard your voice. I read your letters, and I agree with you, and I support you as property owners. You all are in business because one day you will sell your property, or your children and your grandchildren will sell property, and you want to maintain that value just as much as the Riches want to do business here. I'm always pro-business. I really am. I'm the first one to say, government, stay out of my business. Let me do business, and I will govern myself rightly. And I believe that's what you want to do. If you could come up with an alternative to that other than Harmon Road. That was the safety issue that your neighbors are verbalizing loudly. So I'm siding with 5 and 6 in support of property rights. So thank you.
Judge, can I speak?
Yes, would you please?
You don't have to necessarily articulate every reason that you're. So if you just say, I'm citing 5 and 6 or 4 and 5 and 6, but I don't want to cut any justice off either from
4, 5, and 6, and I'll go with the planning board. And I would ask a question though: is there such a thing as a right of domain against the Rogers Group to provide them a road? I'm serious. Is there?
There are ways in which you can try to get a prescriptive easement or a private road. There are statutes for that, but I'm not in a position to. The answer to your question is yes, but it's not always
that easy.
Easy.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question. Might help you.
We'll work on that.
I've already done mine. 4, 5, and 6 very strongly. Thank you.
Daniel?
4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Somewhat of a older issue for some of the folks that have been on the court longer. I know that you folks have been to, I'm sure, lots of meetings, probably sick of meetings at this point about it, and have taken the time out to be here tonight. For some of the other of us that are newer to this, I've done as much due diligence as I know how to do prior to coming in here tonight, and also have tried to listen with a very open mind, because it's a very difficult decision. Property rights by someone who wants to mine versus property rights of someone who lives neighboring, and both are going to be affected by whichever decision we make tonight. So my own personal preference is to have a little more time, not necessarily to garner more information from the parties that have spoke, because we've heard both of those sides very, very thoroughly, and I do understand that both of you spent lots of hours researching and trying to understand exactly what cases to make. But for someone who's heard both of those to be able to go back and deliberate a little bit and consider some things that maybe are not obvious, or maybe take a couple layers deeper of thinking about it, is what I would like to do. But obviously we're going to move that forward tonight, so I may choose to vote present for this one just from lack of ability to make a good determination.
Both groups for being here tonight. You've been patient. You've been very, very courteous to one another. And I just want you all to know how much I appreciate it, and I know all the court appreciates it. Thank you very much for staying with us and being patient. Okay.
It's public comment time if they choose to do it.
And
we've allotted 20 minutes for that. So,
yes, ma'am. Just come forward and identify yourself. Right in the middle of that mic, there, just push that very gently with your, it looks like the
face.
That's it, you got it.
I'm Bonnie Osmond, and I live real close to where the road will be coming in. I'm at the top of the hill where that turns off. The school bus issue, I know of two that come by my house twice a day. One of them comes by at exactly 3:26 every day, and it's a big school bus. It's got a lot of children on it. So he goes by in the morning. I'm retired, so I have no idea what time he comes in the morning. But there is another school bus that comes by, a little bit smaller bus, about half that size, that comes by 3 or 4 minutes before that school bus. So I want to make sure that you know, even though they're not children with school bus stops, there is a school bus that comes down that hill heading north and turns into the left, just almost right across from where the road for the CUP would be coming in. Someone told me that there's a third school bus, but I can speak personally that there are at least two, full of children.
Thank you so much. Any other comments from the public? Yes, ma'am.
There was a comment made, I think, by Sue Madison. I took offense to. She said that I was for this because of my neighbor, and I lived in close proximity to my neighbor. Didn't want to make my neighbor upset. Mark Rich and I have not spoke for probably 12 years. Ever since the initial Gary Combs issue when he wanted to bring his dirt down Rich's Road. We went to school together. We grew up together. That caused a huge conflict between us. We were to the point where 21 families on Rich's Road was going to do a lawsuit against Gary Combs and Mark Rich for the same reasons. Safety, the enjoyment of our property. The same issues are at hand. So if they proceed and go to Rich's Road, which everyone wants a different avenue, everyone wants to, not in my backyard, so go to somewhere else, find another alternative measure. Well, that alternative measure is going to affect more families and other people. So we're going to be right back here again. And I'm going to bring 21 families that are going to be opposing on Rich's Road to come down with the dump trucks. So we're not getting anywhere. We're not resolving the issue. We're just pushing it to someone else's backyard. And I've been there. I've already been there in 2002 with a lot of you probably have already saw me here in the Quorum Court with all of you. With George Butler, and I don't understand that. I'm really kind of disappointed in my watching of the way the Quorum Court's working tonight. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misunderstanding about motions, second readings, third readings, when to vote, when to speak. I'm very disappointed. I know this is a new quorum court. I was at the first quorum court meeting in January, and I was here on Rick Cochran had done an ordinance for me for a marriage. And Rick, you're in my district. I haven't spoke with you on the phone, but you'll be hearing from me tomorrow and probably very soon. But I have to voice my opinion that I'm just disappointed in our system here, and all of you are representing us. I don't feel being represented very well. I mean, and that's just, I'm sorry to say that. I very am truly sorry to say that. But in all the hours that we've been here, I have not been pleased with the understanding, communication amongst the quorum court and the understanding of the procedures.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. Please identify yourself.
Martha Ritchie. I live at 15631 Harmon Road. I am in the face of all of this. My property starts at the top of the hill. It ends at the bottom of the hill. I've lived there for 40 years. I love it there. We have a nice quality of life. Lately, I've taken up the pastime, although I'm quite busy, of counting cars. I'm very familiar with what goes on out there, have been. I know all of the safety issues. I know the compatibility issues. I know the property value issues. I ask you to vote against this, and I hope that it does not pass. Who says we have to have a red dirt pit? Maybe we don't. But in closing, I want to say how much I appreciate the Planning Commission, and I want to say how much I appreciate the Quorum Court. Thank you so much.
Judge, we do not yet have a motion to approve 6.1 as far as I know.
So moved. I have a motion. I have a motion. I have a second. Any other discussion?
Roll call, Judge.
Let's do roll call.
Yes, a yes vote denies the CUP and ratifies the decision of the Planning Board. And everybody understand? Very good.
Okay. Harvey Bowman,
Yes.
Rick Cochran,
Yes.
Robert Dennis,
Yes.
Lisa Ecke,
Yes.
John Furman,
Yes.
Ann Harbison, Tom Lundstrom, Eva Madison, Sue Madison, Joel Maxwell, Joe Patterson,
No.
Butch Pond,
Yes.
Bill Ussery,
Yes.
Daniel Balls.
Yes.
Joe, did you want to make a comment?
I would.
Please go right ahead.
I think long and hard about this, but we got zoning several years ago. It caused a lot of problems for Butch and me because we were both rural JPs and we both voted against it. I've been condemned twice in my life. First time, Fish and Game, state of Kansas walked up and said, "We're here to take your property," and they did. 160 acres of River Bottom Farm. Now it's a duck lake. About 15 years later, federal guys walked up and said, "We're here to take your property because we're going to put a dam up this stream, put in a power dam. This is 7 miles away and moves 7 miles." And they did. But you know, I survived both of those. And that was the one that's been in my family for nearly 100 years, just from right after the Civil War. I don't like going against the property rights. But I don't do it just lightheartedly because however I voted, it wasn't going to matter anyway. I could see that. But anyway, I would have voted the same. I don't believe in trying to look good at the last of the vote just so everybody feels good about me, because I've always voted against this stuff where I thought I needed to. And I'm out there where the A.B. Hunt quarry is, you know, you're talking 100 trucks a day. When they opened that, they were running 300 a day. And then it fell down. Now it's back to about 150 a day. But I will say one thing from the safety issue. When you go back that 250 feet that we mandate from the road, And right past that on farther back, if they'll put in a water pit where they drive through as they're leaving, you'll eliminate a lot of that dirt, because we had a real problem out there on that hill going up Parsons Road. It was just like glass, and it got on there about as thick as that board. But it went all the way. They wash them, change that water every day, clean that pit out, and as they're leaving, they'd pull through there with all the mud and everything on their tires just falls off that last 250 feet before they get to the road, pretty much. Anyway, I appreciate you all coming, you know. You see how our county government works. We can't always all agree. We don't always all disagree. It's stressful on everybody. Nobody likes to do it. But if we want to be popular, we'd find something else to do anyway. So I thank you for your time.
I want to say ordinance 6.1 has passed.
Eva, I move we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same side.